The red-haired prince delivers a stern, final judgment against the silver-haired woman before him. Standing behind him, the dark-haired woman, Mariette, smiles smugly as an official charge of treason is announced. A sudden, loud clamor erupts from the surrounding guests as the news of the betrayal spreads. The severity of the crimes increases as the narrator mentions an attempted assassination against the crown. All eyes turn toward Letitia, the silver-haired noblewoman in the light blue gown, identified as the target of the court's ire. The scene shifts abruptly to a young girl and a modern woman appearing to fall through a digital portal. Back at the ball, the prince stares down at Letitia, demanding to know if she has any defense for her actions. Hushed whispers fill the room as the atmosphere grows increasingly tense around this silent, silver-haired woman. The guests continue their quiet gossip, wondering why such a scandal is unfolding in the middle of a festive celebration. With a calm and resigned expression, Letitia simply states that she has nothing to say in her own defense. A chaotic clamor breaks out as the crowd turns into a mob, loudly demanding her immediate execution. Mariette hides a malicious chuckle behind her golden fan, satisfied that her rival is finally being removed from her path. Letitia speaks one last time, beginning a heartfelt final wish for the couple standing before her. She selflessly tells the prince and Mariette that she hopes they find nothing but happiness together. A quick rush sounds as guards suddenly move in to seize the silver-haired woman by force. A startled gasp echoes as the realization of the situation truly sinks in. On a modern smartphone screen, a gamer watches Lettuce's execution play out in disbelief. A young woman in pajamas realizes that Lettuce's death is an unavoidable, compulsory scene in her mobile game. She collapses onto her bed in frustration, lamenting the fact that all her hard work to help the character was wasted. The perspective shifts to the grand architecture of a prestigious royal academy where the game's story begins. A group of handsome male love interests surrounds a blonde protagonist, illustrating the fantasy world of the Otome game. A digital menu displays various character skills and the progress of romantic feelings between the leads. A light blue-haired love interest invites the player on a quest, leading toward a scripted happy ending. Chibi figures of the game's heroes stand on a shelf as the narrator highlights the game's appeal to fans of the genre. A quick whoosh sounds as the focus returns to the tragic narrative of Letty, the girl destined for the guillotine. Letty is depicted in her original role, a cold antagonist who frequently harassed the story's main character. Later scenes show her redemption, as Letty had a change of heart after being moved by the protagonist's kindness. However, her fate was sealed when Mariette, the true villain, framed her for the crimes she is now dying for. In a quiet bedroom, the modern gamer reflects on the tragic unfairness of Letty's scripted death. With a series of frustrated kicks and flumps, the girl throws a tantrum on her bed over the confusing plot twist. She continues to roll and roll across her mattress, complaining about the narrative shift from Letty to Mariette. After a quick sit-up and a final tap on her phone, she decides she is too hooked on the game to stop now. Seeing that it is past 10 at night, she realizes she doesn't have to work tomorrow and can keep playing. With a final determined thwop against her covers, she decides to see the story through to the very end. A quick dash sounds as a child runs excitedly down a hallway. A young, silver-haired Letty jumps into her father's arms with a joyful welcome as a soft thwop sounds. A sudden clack announces the arrival of a woman in an ornate purple dress who interrupts their reunion. The woman requests a private conversation regarding the family's land and an upcoming marriage. Young Letty looks up in confusion as her father, Lord Carlo, agrees to the meeting. A cold, calculating woman is reflected in Letty's wide, startled eye as she senses something is wrong. Letty trembles with fear as her father explains that the marriage is necessary to save their domain from financial ruin. Seated together on her bed, Lord Carlo apologizes for the difficult situation they are facing. The silver-haired child gazes at him, her expression filled with worry for her father. With a gentle smooch on her forehead, her father promises to protect her at all costs for the sake of her late mother. A heavy bam and thump sound as Letty suddenly tumbles to the floor with a painful cry. Her cruel stepmother looms over her, calling her an eyesore and ordering her to leave the house immediately. Narrative text appears as the protagonist wonders if she is simply dreaming about Letty's childhood. A creak sounds as she sits up in a new bed, relieved that the previous nightmare has ended. She reaches out for her phone to check the time, but her voice trails off as she notices something strange. Looking at her tiny hands, she realizes with shock that she has become a petite version of the game character. A wave of cold chills fills the room as the silver-haired girl stares wide-eyed, wondering what is happening. Her bare feet land softly with a rhythmic step-step as she tentatively moves away from her bed. A sudden, loud thwop sounds as she catches her reflection in the mirror, letting out a panicked, stuttering cry of disbelief. She realizes that Letty looks even younger than in her dreams, appearing to be only 6 years old and trapped inside a game. She screams in confusion about the situation until a note from the original Letty appears, explaining their soul swap and her new magic. The child stares at the paper in her hand, questioning the reality of what she just read. Kneeling on the floor, she wonders why her predecessor is forcing her to live a life she didn't choose. A sudden, sharp gasp echoes through the quiet room as the realization of her predicament truly hits her. She realizes that she now possesses the magic she always desired and can begin training from a very young age. A bright, magical shine emanates from her as she playfully raises a staff, excited to see what she can accomplish. Her excitement quickly fades into dread as she considers the consequences of being stuck in this tragic role. She imagines a cruel woman pointing a finger and declaring that Letitia is officially sentenced. The vision of her future self grows increasingly tense as she breaks into a nervous sweat. Standing before a massive guillotine, the older version of her character accepts the grim reality of her impending death. A frantic thwop sounds as the girl throws a tantrum in her bed, screaming that she does not want this life. She rolls and rolls across her mattress, refusing to accept a fate that ends at the base of a blade. A soft rustle of blankets follows her desperate kicks as she rejects the scripted death awaiting her at 18. A soft hug sounds as she clutches her pillow, unable to believe she has actually been reborn into a game. A firm tighten sounds as she pulls her silver hair into a neat style, preparing to face her new reality. Looking at her reflection, she tells herself that everything is going to be all right. A quick reach sounds as she grabs a stack of papers to begin documenting everything she knows. Sitting at her desk, she decides she must find a way to make sense of the situation and form a plan to escape her fate. She recalls her experience as a modern gamer, screaming a loud "warg" in memory of her late-night play sessions. A rhythmic lift and grip sounds as she begins writing, trying to remember every detail of the game's plot. A nervous tremble shakes her hand as she struggles to write, frustrated by the lack of coordination in her 6-year-old body. She laments her poor control over the quill, comparing her current self to the 24-year-old woman she used to be. She reflects on a memory of her father and wonders if the dream was a warning from the original Letty about the future. A sharp clack sounds from the distance as she stares into a fractured vision of her adult self, determined to change the bad ending. A sudden kick sounds as she realizes she must avoid any events that lead to her death, starting immediately. She recalls that the trouble began when Lord Carlo sought financial aid by remarrying a wealthy lady. The narrative flow continues to the point where the new stepmother eventually chases the girl out of her own home. She remembers how she became dependent on the second prince and his group after losing everything. The final step of the tragic cycle shows her being tricked and sentenced to death in a definitive bad ending. She realizes that her family's domain was poor and that they will be forced to borrow money very soon if she doesn't intervene. A long, weary sigh escapes her as she contemplates the weight of her family's debt. A soft sprawl sounds as she collapses against the desk, worrying about the moment her stepmother will turn her out. She remembers that someone had offered her kindness when she was at her lowest point in the original story. She realizes she was being manipulated the entire time she served the second prince and his faction. Her plan was to focus on changing those compulsory events, but she finds herself overwhelmed by the difficulty. She recalls her time playing the game and decides that Letty was simply cursed with the worst luck possible. A steady tap-tap sounds as she writes her primary goal, solving the domain's debt issue first. A quick slide sounds as she pushes her chair back from the desk to investigate her surroundings. A sharp knock-knock and a sudden jolt at the door interrupt her frantic planning. A metallic kerchak sounds as the door opens, and her father, Lord Carlo, asks if it is a good time to talk. A heavy bend and the sound of her heart going ba-dump follow her shock as she tries to hide her panic from him. A soft reach sounds as his hand moves toward her, and she realizes she must hide her internal thoughts to survive. A gentle rub on her head accompanies his announcement that he will be going away for a few days. He explains that because the domain is poor, he must visit another territory to ask for a specific favor. She asks what kind of favor he needs, and he simply replies that he is going to ask them for salt. A curious reach sounds as she wonders why the leader of a land has to travel so far just to find simple salt. A firm grab sounds as Lord Carlos stops before leaving, mentioning one final task he must perform. A warm hug sounds as the gray-haired man happily cuddles his beloved daughter. Letty panics at his delay, but Lord Carlo gloomily admits it is truly painful to leave her. Letty realizes her father dotes on her far more than she originally expected. A gentle kiss sounds as Lord Carlo explains he must fulfill his duties to his territory. Letty gapes in surprise as her father puts her down, entrusting the household to her care. A sudden kerchak sounds as he calls out to Letty one last time before departing. With a quick turn, Lord Carlo promises to return to her very soon. A heavy thud sounds as Letty screams into her mattress in complete frustration. Letty rolls and rolls and rolls across her bed, panicking about being kissed by her handsome father while having a 24-year-old's mind. A sharp gasp sounds as she tells himself to calm down and focus on her new life. With rhythmic step-step sounds and a quick flop, she approaches her desk to solve the domain's financial problems. Letty pauses at the desk as a new, important thought suddenly occurs to her. She questions why salt is so rare in this world compared to modern-day Japan. A sudden bam sounds as she realizes that salt is considered an extremely valuable luxury in this game. People desperately clamor for the rare resource as the narrative highlights the world's extreme salt shortage. Letty realizes that the lack of salt will ruin the domain's economy and its ability to trade food. The silver-haired girl wonders if there is a way for them to produce their own salt. A loud bam sounds as she realizes her past life in modern Japan gives her an unfair advantage. She decides to use her modern knowledge to find a unique solution to the family's problems. A soft step sounds as she recalls a crucial detail about the geography of her family's lands. Letty is overjoyed to remember that her coastal domain provides her with easy access to seawater. A quick flop sounds as she looks out the window, realizing they can manufacture unlimited salt. A firm press sounds as she realizes this discovery can prevent her family from falling into debt. A metallic kerchak sounds as she opens her window with a confident plan in mind. A loud bam sounds as she officially starts her mission to produce salt and change her fate. Letty enters the Grand Temple Library, excited to see an iconic location from the game world. A soft reach sounds as she searches the library shelves for information on salt production. The silver-haired girl is confident she will find all the answers she needs within these books. Two attendants use ice magic to create sculptures while worrying about potential damage to their work. An attendant dismisses a minor accident, noting that the children involved had no ill intentions. Letty is completely stunned to witness people using real magic right in front of her. She watches in awe as ice magic manifests, finding the magical display absolutely incredible. Letty realizes that since magic is common here, she must possess some latent power as well. She wonders if a specific chant or pose is required to activate her own magical abilities. A dark-haired man politely asks if the young lady has come to the library to read. Letty is momentarily dazed as she recognizes the handsome priest from the game's story. A quick point sounds as Letty identifies the man as High Priest Ladius. She recalls that High Priest Ladius is an elite official who frequently communicates with her father. High Priest Ladius asks what she seeks, and she enthusiastically tells him she wants to study magic. While the priest asks for specifics, Letty decides she must play dumb to hide her true nature. Letty's expression begins to brighten as she prepares to name the specific magic she wants to learn. High Priest Ladius is baffled when the silver-haired girl suddenly requests to learn fire magic. Letty excitedly envisions her plan to use fire to evaporate seawater and produce massive amounts of salt. A sudden whoosh sounds as she thinks about the fire magic necessary to complete her distillation project. Letty triumphantly names her new strategy to use fire magic for massive salt production. A soft gasp sounds as the priest looks down at the child with a mixture of confusion and concern. High Priest Ladius explains that her family's lineage is only capable of using ice magic. Letty's eye widens in shock as the priest's words sink in. Letty is left completely speechless by the revelation that she cannot use fire magic. Letty is caught off guard by a sudden, jarring realization. She recalls the game's protagonist being able to use every element, which she considers a blatant act of cheating. Letty reflects on how her own character is restricted to using only ice magic. A long, frantic cry of shock sounds as the girl completely forgot about this limitation. She screams in disbelief at being restricted to ice magic, while Latias calmly confirms her fate. Latias asks why she is so shocked, prompting Letty to claim she was just double-checking her knowledge. Despair hits Letty as her salt production plan fails, while the priest grows curious about her goals. A gentle rub sounds as Latias realizes she is only trying to help her father. Letty laments being stuck in a child's body, while the priest notes salt production is theoretically possible. Latias explains that high rainfall prevents sun-drying seawater in this specific region. A sharp gasp sounds as Letty learns that cutting timber for firewood is strictly forbidden in the area.
Latias explains the local forests belong to the Spirit King and must be respected by all.
An ice sculpture of a white tiger stands majestically atop a stone pedestal. Letty realizes the Spirit King is this world's god and holds absolute power over the land.
Latias notes the deity takes different forms, appearing as a tiger in this specific area, while Letty nods along. The priest asks if something is wrong while Letty struggles to find the right words.
Letty questions what they use for fuel if they cannot cut down the trees. Latias clarifies they only use fallen branches or leaves permitted by the Spirit King's divinity. He adds that they must otherwise purchase fuel from outside the region to survive. Letty grows discouraged upon learning they only obtain the minimum amount of fuel needed for survival. A soft gasp escapes her as she considers her limited options for saving the domain. Letty suggests hiring fire magic users, but Latias immediately shoots down the idea. He explains that Sentencia only has ice magic and fire mages are far too expensive for them. A quick flop sounds as Letty turns away, falling into a pensive, worried silence. A heavy plop sounds as Letty collapses in defeat, causing the priest to call out in concern. Overwhelming gloom surrounds Letty as she feels she has reached a total dead end. She realizes the domain's underlying problems must be solved before she can address the salt shortage. Letty notes the territory has enough salt for food, but lacks the quantity needed for trade. She recognizes the real problem is the desperate lack of salt for exports. Salt is vital for trading with other domains and securing the foreign currency they need. She throws a tantrum, cursing her luck for being stuck with the ice element. Latias is confused by her sudden outburst regarding a fact she should have known since birth. Letty recalls how useful ice magic would have been during hot summers in modern Japan. A sharp gasp sounds as a memory of making fruit sorbet sparks a brand new idea. Letty excitedly declares they can freeze seawater, catching the priest completely by surprise. She recalls that freezing seawater separates salt from water, allowing her to use magic for production. Letty smirks, realizing her modern knowledge is the key to finally conquering this game world. Rhythmic clack-clack sounds follow her as she rushes through the temple library. Letty shouts a goodbye to Latias as she sprints toward the temple exit. A loud bam sounds as she accidentally collides with someone directly in her path. Letty reels from the impact as the person apologizes for the unexpected collision. A girl asks if she came to play, leaving Letty panicking over their forgotten identities. A quick tap sounds as Letty struggles to remember their names until Latias interjects. Latias identifies the group as Lynn, Glenn, Ricardo, and Lolo while they gather leaves for pay. The dark-haired boy confirms they are working hard for their compensation. A blonde boy yells in agreement with his group of friends. A young girl wonders if they will earn enough to buy snacks later. Letty remembers her original self was close to these children from the temple orphanage. She reflects on how the rural nature of Sentencia allows commoners and nobles to be friends. Letty realizes social status isn't a barrier here, though she is still asked about her destination. The silver-haired girl excitedly announces she is going to the port, surprising her companion. The dark-haired priest notes the danger and suggests she shouldn't go alone. He asks the black-haired boy to accompany her and take the other children alone. The silver-haired girl is surprised as the black-haired boy agrees to the request. The scene shifts to the shore where crashing waves are rushing sounds. A tired, sounds from a young blonde-haired boy. The blonde boy complains that the silver-haired girl is always getting in their way. The girl remembers the boy's rude personality and asks if they really wanted to pick up leaves. The blonde girl with twin tails explains they were gathering leaf money for the black-haired boy's school. The black-haired boy is embarrassed and scolds her for revealing his secret bowl.
The blonde boy suggests they just use the money for snacks instead of school fees.
The silver-haired girl panics, realizing the school is the capital's elite academy. Fearing for her life at the academy, she asks the black-haired boy if he really wants to go. The black-haired boy hesitantly confirms his desire to attend the prestigious school. The silver-haired girl watches him in a thoughtful, silent pause. A sudden turn sounds as the black-haired boy reacts to his friend calling his name. The black-haired boy holds a purple object while the girl realizes he was about to say something. Her attention is taken by her own soft grunting sounds while carrying a heavy wooden bucket.
The brown-haired girl questions her destination, and she explains she is seeking salt.
The black-haired boy asks if she is cooking, but she says it is an experiment.
The silver-haired girl prepares to ask her friends for their assistance. She asks the group if they can lend her a hand with her project.
2 wooden buckets sit on the sand filled with seawater.
The silver-haired girl asks for attention, while the brown-haired girl wonders about the bucket's purpose.
The silver-haired girl declares her intention to obtain salt for everyone.
She explains she will extract salt from the seawater using their ice magic.
A loud laugh sounds as the blonde boy mocks the idea's possibility. A sudden grab sounds as she picks up a stick to draw her explanation. She explains how seawater consists of both salt and water. She illustrates that freezing only the water will allow them to obtain the salt. Despite the black-haired boy's skepticism, the silver-haired girl insists they will make it work.
The blonde girl with twin tails is only interested in eating snacks afterward. The children gather together in a circle around the buckets. The group agrees to do whatever they can to help with the task.
The black-haired boy stares at his bucket in total shock.
As sunset approaches, the children try to adjust their magic while the girl remains confident. The silver-haired girl celebrates her successful magic use, noting it was a piece of cake. She explains that success means they will never have to buy salt again.
The other children are excited about earning money for meat instead of leaves. The girl is determined to successfully draw the salt out of the ice. A wet sloosh sounds, followed by a sharp crack as the magic misfires. As dusk falls, the black-haired boy suggests they should all ha-hum. The silver-haired girl remains enthusiastic, promising to try again tomorrow. The blonde boy's mouth opens as he asks a question. He laments being ice magic users and wishes they had fire magic for better jobs.
A quick flop sounds as the girl argues for the benefits of ice magic.
A sudden gasp sounds as the boy rejects her ideas about cooling down.
The silver-haired girl realizes that modern luxuries like shaved ice do not exist here.
A startled gasp sounds as the brown-haired girl notes how strangely the girl is acting. A sudden irk sounds as the girl is reminded that she usually hates ice magic too. A loud bam sounds as Letty excitedly suggests making the best use of their current resources.
Letty is bewildered by the cold reaction she receives.
Ricardo warns that things never end well when she gets carried away, while Lynn notes she will only get angry at them later.
Lolo complains that she does not want to get dragged into this and lose their snacks. Glenn gently reminds her that it is not right to cause trouble for other people.
Letty is horrified by the original version of herself's reputation and the total lack of trust.
The children wave goodbye as they head home through the gates at sunset.
A sharp kerchak sounds as Letty grabs a door handle to stop one of them. Letty urgently calls out to Glenn.
Glenn asks what is wrong as he tries to speak about the situation with the school. Letty asks if he is talking about the School of Sorcery, and he confirms it.
Glenn asks her not to mention his goals to the High Priest or Lord Carlo.
He explains he does not want them stretching their resources to get him in while the others wait nearby. Glenn reflects on the events that took place earlier that day. Glenn expresses his desire to do whatever he can to help and secure his future. Letty watches him with a soft, appreciative smile. Letty agrees to keep a secret and tells him she is rooting for his success. She watches the group walk away, noting that Glenn has not given up on the School of Sorcery.
Letty wonders to herself if she will actually make it into the prestigious school. Letty is hit by a sudden, jarring memory concerning Glenn's future. She recalls a dark future where Glenn and Ricardo appear as hooded, armed figures.
The memory shows a much older, more sinister version of the boy. In the memory, Glenn shouts about how nobility did nothing to earn their place while Ricciardo prepares for an abduction. Letty realizes that Glenn and Ricardo are destined to become villainous non-player characters in a few years.
A soft shut sounds as Letty closes the door, realizing why he looked so familiar. She recalls that Glenn is never actually accepted into the school in the original game world. Letty panics, realizing she needs to do something to prevent this tragic outcome.
She reflects on how Glenn goes down a dark and dangerous path when he is rejected by the school.
The memory shows Glenn's eventual death at the hands of the protagonist after his kidnapping plot fails.
Letty feels terrible that such a good child might end up with the wrong crowd as a soft tap-tap sounds. A rhythmic chirp-chirp-chirp sounds as morning breaks over the quiet temple grounds. A sudden gasp sounds as Letty wakes up and realizes she has completely overslept.
A sharp clatter sounds as papers flutter while she worries about the others waiting for her.
A rhythmic knock-knock sounds at the door, catching her off guard.
Lynn bursts into the room with a bright expression while carrying a heavy wooden bucket.
Letty is startled by the girl's sudden appearance and asks what is going on. The rest of the children crowd into the doorway behind their friend. Lolo excitedly declares that Glenn figured out how to produce pure salt using his ice magic. Lolo urges the silver-haired girl to look at the salt they managed to obtain. The bottom of the wooden bucket is covered in a layer of sparkling white crystals. The bucket is shown to be filled with high-quality, pure salt. Letty is awestruck by the success and praises Glenn for his amazing achievement.
A sudden whoosh sounds as Letty lunges at Glenn, causing him to flinch and tell her to calm down.
Glenn smiles as he explains he did exactly what she suggested the previous day. He illustrates how he adjusted his magic to only freeze the water, separating it cleanly from the salt. Glenn offers to teach Letty his magic formula as she looks at him with deep gratitude. Lolo squeals with delight about buying snacks, while Ricardo dashes forward demanding meat instead.
A quick reach sounds as Glenn notes that the salt will finally allow them to purchase the things they need.
Letty watches her friends in a pensive, quiet silence.
Letty reflects on how Glenn really is a good-hearted and talented child.
Letty hugs Glenn while thinking about his dark future as a villain and wondering what event will trigger his descent into evil.
Holding a wooden bucket, Letty reflects on the implications of being reborn into this world's story.
Glenn smiles warmly at his friends while Letty realizes her reincarnation affects more than just her own life. A loud rumbling bam sounds as Murray scolds Letty for playing truant for 5 days after the salt experiment. Letty explains that she is being yelled at by Murray, her family's mage and tutor.
A sharp kerchak sounds as Ladius enters, and Letty begs for help while Murray demands her full attention.
A bright aura surrounds Lord Carlo as he cheerfully announces his return home to Letty. Letty is startled by her father's arrival, remembering he had been traveling to other regions to negotiate for salt. Lord Carlo warmly expresses how much he missed Letty and asks if she has been doing well.
A sudden reach sounds as Letty hesitantly accepts her father's greeting.
A quick swing sounds as Lord Carlo lifts Letty, expressing relief that she isn't hurt while hoping she hasn't been acting impulsively. Letty quickly denies that anything out of the ordinary happened during her father's absence. Squealing with delight as she is lifted, Letty reflects on her previous reputation as a troublemaker. A rhythmic clack sounds as a newcomer questions if Letty's denial actually suggests she's been misbehaving. A blond man with a backpack and a smirk appears behind the group. Letty is shocked to recognize the man as Sector, remembering he was a character close to her father in the original game. Sector wonders why Letty is so surprised to see him, asking if it's just because they haven't met in a long time.
A soft slip sounds as Murray tells Sector to put down his things, while Letty identifies him as a merchant and close friend of Lord Carlo. A sudden thwump sounds as Sector drops his backpack, while Letty reflects on how he often accompanies her father on business trips. A loud bam sounds as Lord Carlo defensively argues that Letty's rowdy personality is part of what makes her cute. A heavy sigh followed by a push sound occurs as Sector and Murray react with exasperation, while Letty wonders if her father was actually complimenting her. A sharp jolt sounds as Sector tells Lord Carlo to stop being such a doting father, but Carlo rejects the title with an intense stare. Sector asks what he should call his friend instead, while Letty observes the conversation with confusion. Lord Carlo becomes dead serious, stating he refuses to be compared to all the other ordinary parents. Sector and Letty both look completely drained as Lord Carlo declares that his love for his daughter surpasses all others. Letty is visibly put off by her father's intense and embarrassing display of affection. Sector teases Carlo about Letty being the apple of his eye, while Carlo is confused by the phrase and Letty calls her father an airhead. Lord Carlo smiles warmly, looking forward to seeing what his daughter will ask of him now that he's back. Letty experiences a moment of silent, wide-eyed shock. A bright aura surrounds Letty as she cheerily tells her father she's just happy he has returned home safely. A quick fwop sounds followed by a sigh as Carlo joyfully hugs Letty while Murray and Sector decide to leave the pair be. Letty realizes that her original childlike feelings are starting to take over her adult consciousness. Lord Carlo gazes ahead with a silent, contemplative expression. A rhythmic kerchak and several thumping sounds occur as Ladius enters the room to greet Lord Carlo. Lord Carlo explains that his salt negotiations failed because other domains are also suffering from shortages. Letty is relieved by the news, while Sector and Lord Carlo look at her with confused expressions. Sector is stunned by the high-quality salt Letty and her friends produced, calling the discovery incredible. Sector and Ladius examine the salt, noting its purity and the simple magic formula required to create it.
A sudden jolt sounds as Mireille lifts Letty, expressing amazement and a desire to meet the child who invented the process. Letty looks away nervously as she reflects on the salt-making process. Glenn is confused by Letty's request to tell everyone that he was the one who invented the salt-making process. Letty explains through narration that she decided the invention should have nothing to do with her.
Letty gives a thumbs up, reflecting on the importance of staying inconspicuous as a fundamental principle of reincarnation.
Letty realizes that giving Glenn credit will make it easier for him to get a scholarship to the sorcery school.
A loud bam sounds as Sector excitedly prepares to find out the details of the magic used for the salt.
A soft squeeze sounds as Lord Carlo clings to Letty, protesting that he still wants to spend time with her.
Sector yells at Carlo, calling him a fool for not wanting to know the technical details of the salt production.
A firm tug sounds as Sector grabs Lord Carlo's collar.
Two dragging sounds echo as Sector hauls the crying Lord Carlo out of the room while Letty watches.
An irritated irk sounds as Letty clenches her fists, annoyed that her father is actually leaving after his dramatic display.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounds as Letty stares ahead in wide-eyed shock. Looking down at her shoes, the girl wonders what just occurred.
Letty reflects on how she was just trying to act like a normal child.
A sudden jolt sounds as Mireille asks a terrified Letty if she's ready for a fun lesson. Multiple steps sound as Mireille drags the girl away, refusing to let her go until her lessons are finished.
Letty wonders what those strange, lingering feelings were. Adjusting her glasses with a sharp glint, Mireille prepares to finish her previous lecture.
A heavy thwump sounds as Letty collapses onto her bed in total exhaustion.
The girl pouts while lying face down on her mattress.
The scene shifts to a moonlit balcony where two elegant figures stand.
Letty realizes she is witnessing a dream vision of her future self and the villainess Mariette. Mariette bluntly reveals that she betrayed Letty simply out of pure hatred. Mariette explains her resentment toward Lettice's elegance, power, and status as a child genius. The villainess mocks Letty for upstaging the second prince's top bride candidate. The vision shows Letty looking completely devastated by the betrayal. A soft ha sounds as Letty breathes out, still reeling from the dream. A quiet ha sounds near the girl's teddy bear in a closed book. Letty wakes up realizing the dream was a vision of her life after being exiled. A long, weary sigh sounds as Letty reflects on the nightmare. A soft shift sounds as Letty turns, wondering if this tragic future is unavoidable. Letty worries that this dark path might be waiting for her. A rhythmic creak sounds as Letty opens the door. Stepping onto the balcony, Letty expresses a desire to feel the evening breeze. A tired ha sounds as the girl leans over the railing. Letty reflects on her original self cycle of betrayal, threats, and being framed. The girl is confused by her own sudden tears. Letty wonders if the original girl's emotions are starting to merge with her own. Letty fears she will lose her original Japanese identity if this continues. The girl questions her true identity while surrounded by lush greenery. Looking at the stars, Letty admits she wants to go back to Japan. A loud crack sounds as magic manifests inside the library. Glenn looks skeptical, asking Letty if she is certain about her decision. Letty insists that Glenn take credit for the salt invention as she praises him. A soft blush sounds as Glenn touches his cheek, looking bashful. Glenn smiles warmly, telling Letty that the success is all thanks to her. Mireille confirms that Glenn is now her household's foster son and will enroll in school. Letty listens as Glenn reveals he had already taken the scholarship exam. The girl and another child are both shocked by Glenn's sudden revelation. A soft crackle sounds as Glenn explains he was rejected for having ice magic. A firm clench sounds as Glenn curses the fact he was born with his magic. A loud bam sounds as Letty enthusiastically encourages Glenn to use what he has. Glenn realizes that Letty's perspective on magic was entirely correct. Glenn expresses his gratitude for Letty showing him the potential of ice magic. Letty smiles brightly while calling out Glenn's name. A quick turn sounds as Glenn vows to become an amazing sorcerer using his magic. A rhythmic clack sounds as Letty's shoes hit the floor. Letty is relieved that Glenn won't end up on the side of evil after all. A triumphant ta-da sounds as Letty celebrates procuring salt for the domain. The girl marches down the hallway, determined to earn even more money. Letty hopes her hard work means her father will spend more time playing with her. A sudden sharp gasp sounds as Letty stares ahead in wide-eyed shock. Clutching her head, the girl realizes that her previous memories vanished again for a moment. Letty is confused about her origins, wondering why her father's past seems connected to Japan.
A frantic buzzing sound fills the air as Letty's mind becomes a chaotic blur. Looking completely lost, the girl admits she can no longer remember. Letty's hand trembles as a heavy silence falls over her. A table is set with a hearty meal, though it remains untouched. A sudden clatter sounds as Letty puts down her spoon, quietly excusing herself from the meal. Lord Carlo watches his daughter with a look of quiet concern. The man points out that Letty hasn't been eating much and asks if she is feeling okay.
Forcing a cheerful expression, the girl insists she is doing fine.
A rhythmic step sound occurs as Letty leaves the table, announcing she is returning to her room. A series of quick scritching sounds follow as Letty frantically writes, desperate to record her memories. Surrounded by loose papers, the girl reflects on her fading memories of the modern world and the game. Letty is overcome with fear, realizing she will forget everything if she doesn't keep writing. Gasping in panic, the girl worries that she is losing her original identity too quickly. Letty imagines herself becoming a normal child again, surrounded by simple toys and animals. Determined to save her home, the girl realizes she must speak to the adults while she still remembers the future. Tears well up in Letty's eyes as she struggles with the secret that she isn't the original girl. The girl fears that she will be rejected and exiled once everyone discovers the truth about her identity. More frantic scritching sounds fill the room as Letty expresses her deep terror through her writing. A soft hiccup sounds as the crying girl desperately pleads for someone to help her.
Scattered papers are covered in desperate pleas for help as Letty wonders if anyone can hear her.
A bright sparkle surrounds Lord Carlo as he cheerfully greets Letty the next morning. A soft reach sounds as the man gently pats his daughter's head.
Letty returns the greeting with a bright smile, though she is internally resolved to hide her true feelings.
Lord Carlo notes that she has been looking sad lately and gently checks on her.
A wide grin spreads across Carlo's face as he announces he has something special to show her.
A rhythmic trot sounds as horse hooves move across the grassy terrain.
Riding together on horseback, Letty asks her father where they are heading.
Lord Carlo reveals that their destination is the Sacred Spirits Woods.
Letty is filled with excitement, repeating the name of the mysterious location.
Narration explains that the Spirit Woods is a sacred area protected by the powerful Spirit King. Letty reflects on how only the domain's leader is usually allowed to enter this hidden sanctuary. Lord Carlo looks down warmly, pleased that his daughter is finally smiling again. A quiet gasp of surprise escapes the girl as she looks up at her father.
A rhythmic trot continues as Carlo expresses that her smile is what suits her the best.
Leaning against her father, Letty softly apologizes for her recent behavior. Letty cries out in wonder as they arrive at a breathtaking hidden clearing. The forest is filled with beautiful, glowing lights that dance between the ancient trees. Pointing at the sky, the girl asks about the glowing orbs, and their father identifies them as baby spirits. Carlo explains that the spirits are still developing their consciousness but will soon become aware. The father and daughter enjoy the mysterious atmosphere of the sacred woods together. Approaching a stone structure, Letty asks about its purpose and learns it is an altar for the spirits. Lord Carlo fixes his gaze on Letty, asking if she remembers this place. A soft rustle sounds as the girl looks confused, while her father mentions she collapsed here years ago. Another rustle sounds as Letty wonders if that event marked the moment she first arrived in this body. Lord Carlo kneels at the altar, somberly stating that he lost his precious daughter in that very spot. Letty is struck with silent shock, wondering what her father could possibly mean. Looking her directly in the eye, Lord Carlo calls her his other beloved daughter, Letty. Letty's heart races in complete shock. A rhythmic ba-dump sounds as the man explains that another soul entered his daughter's body after she passed away.
A firm stand sounds as Carlo explains he decided to let her live as his daughter despite her initial memory loss.
Carlo mentions he knows she came up with the idea for magic salt production, leaving Letty stunned. Letty realizes her father has known her true identity for a long time. Carlo admits to reading the notes in her room, surprising the panicked girl. Letty is terrified, wondering if she will be attacked for not being his biological daughter after his discovery. A soft rustle sounds as the man begins to speak again. Another soft rustle sounds as the father walks through the woods with his daughter.
A firm squeeze sounds as the girl resolves to defend herself if he gets angry with her.
Letty is caught off guard by a warm, unexpected hug. Letty is stunned by the HUD. Carlo apologizes, explaining his original daughter stole her body without permission and caused her nothing but pain.
Letty's eyes fill with tears as she rests her head on her father's shoulder. The forest altar stands quiet and mysterious. Carlo kneels and embraces Letty while reflecting on the moment of her arrival.
A tight squeeze sounds as Letty cries out for her papa and grips him back emotionally. Carlo pulls back and asks if his hug was too tight for her. Letty finally asks how he discovered that she wasn't the original girl.
Letty apologizes for keeping the truth hidden while her father comforts her. Carlo explains he was present at the altar when the souls were switched. A vision shows a young girl standing before the altar in the sacred woods. A younger Carlo runs toward the girl, calling out her name in a panic.
The girl turns with a smile, apologizing for not explaining things earlier.
Magic swirls violently around the girl. Carlo yells in alarm, telling her she is not allowed to use that forbidden spell. Carlo begs her to stop as magic pulses from the altar during the dangerous ritual. A desperate reach sounds as Carlo tries to stop his daughter.
A heavy flump sounds as the girl collapses, leaving her father in a panic.
The girl's eyes flutter open softly.
A relieved pew sounds as Carlo sees she is awake and prays her soul wasn't swapped. The young girl looks up at him and asks who he is.
Carlo realized his daughter was gone.
He notes she was only a 3-year-old with no memories when she first arrived.
Letty admits she eventually got used to the situation after everything she experienced in this world.
Carlo explains his plan was to tell her the truth once she grew up. He mentions how her original memories finally returned once she turned 6.
Carlo promises to protect her from the future and find a way to return her home.
A sudden thwop sounds as Letty asks how he knows about the future events.
Carlo simply repeats that he read the notes she wrote in her room. Letty realizes her father saw all her private writings. Carlo mentions knowing she would be forced to become the second prince's fiancé. Letty is horrified that he read the details about her being tricked and executed at 18.
A heavy, silent tension fills the air. Carlo reveals he isn't the only one who knows the truth about her secret.
Letty's eyes widen in intense shock. Letty frantically asks for clarification while her father looks apologetic.
Carlo explains that Murray, Sector, and High Priest Ladius have also accepted her true identity.
Letty has a comedic breakdown over the realization that all the adults already knew her secret.
Letty wonders why Lord Carlo was so kind to her despite knowing the truth.
Letty asks her father about his plans now that he knows the full extent of her memories. The group of adults gathers in the parlor to review Letty's written accounts of the future. Sector looks toward the girl in disbelief as he begins to process the shocking information. A sudden clatter sounds as Sector jumps to his feet, horrified to read about Lettuce's predicted death at 18. A sharp kerchak sounds as Sector continues reading about the domain's impending debt and the strange mentions of a repeating life.
Letty reflects on how she explained the rest of her knowledge to the adults, though she still kept the world's status as a game to herself.
Lord Carlo suggests they focus on a strategy to prevent the financial ruin mentioned in her notes. A sudden thwop sounds as Sector enthusiastically praises Letty for her clever salt-making strategy. A firm stand sounds as Lord Carlo also offers his heartfelt admiration for his daughter's intelligence. Lord Carlo blushes as he reaches out to embrace his daughter, overwhelmed with pride at how smart she is. Letty tentatively asks if he still wants to be her father, and he responds with a bright, loving expression.
A soft smooch sounds as Lord Carlo gives his daughter a tender kiss on the cheek to show his gratitude.
Letty is left stunned and blushing by the sudden display of affection from her father. Lord Carlo looks on with a soft, slightly sheepish smile.
Murray and High Priest Ladius watch the scene with mixed reactions of confusion and exasperation at the display.
The adults bicker over whether Lord Carlo's habit of acting like a doting father is appropriate given Letty's true identity. Letty is in a state of shock, realizing her father fully accepts her presence despite knowing the truth.
Ladius tentatively advises that Letty should continue her life as she has been to avoid drawing attention. He explains that any sudden change in her behavior would look suspicious due to the nature of the forbidden spell.
A quiet silence falls as Letty remains in her father's protective embrace. Lord Carlo agrees to the plan and promises to keep acting as her devoted father. Narration explains that only these 4 adults are aware of the secret regarding Letty's soul. Ladius turns his attention back to the girl, mentioning he has a specific question for her.
The High Priest asks if she has any lingering memories of her previous life before arriving here.
He probes for details about her original family or parents, causing Letty to look away thoughtfully. Ladius posits that her soul might be adapting and trying to assimilate into her current world.
He mentions legends of techniques used by gods to bind memories and prevent demonic takeovers.
Murray wonders why the original girl didn't choose a soul from this world to swap with instead of an outsider. Ladius believes that answering that specific question is the key to solving the entire mystery. The High Priest clarifies that his current line of reasoning is strictly hypothetical.
The scene focuses on the mysterious nature of the events as Ladius continues his deduction. Imagery of a grand capital and clockwork appears as Ladius speaks of the Spirit King's power over time and space.
He suspects the original Letty used her position to obtain the soul-swapping spell during a repeating life. Murray questions how a user of ice magic could have performed such a complex soul-swapping ritual. Ladius admits he currently has no explanation for that particular inconsistency. He remains certain that the original girl somehow managed to cast the forbidden spell at a very young age.
A soft gulp sounds as Letty feels the heavy weight of the High Priest's questioning. Ladius ponders the risks the original girl took to procure the spell and exchange souls with another world.
Letty suggests the goal was to interrupt an endless cycle of repeating lives, which Ladius confirms with a nod.
Lord Carlo listens with a grave expression as they discuss his original daughter's motivations. Ladius theorizes that the introduction of a foreign soul was intended to change the world's fixed path. Letty resolves to break the loop of fate before her soul is completely assimilated by the body.
She worries that becoming one with the body will mean losing her original identity forever. A determined look settles on the girl's face as she faces her father.
Lord Carlo kneels and holds her face, promising to protect her no matter what happens in the future.
The other adults join the reassurance, reminding Letty that she has their full support as well. Later that night, the girl rests in her large canopy bed, lost in her thoughts. A faint glint sounds as she raises her wrist to examine a special golden brick sign.
Letty explains she uses the bracelet and memories of Japan to keep her soul from merging with her current form.
A soft roll sounds as she turns in bed, fearing that the assimilation process is accelerating too quickly.
Letty worries her choices might mirror her game counterpart's tragic fate. Fractured memories of her stepmother's cruelty and the original girl's suffering flicker through her mind.
A sudden gasp sounds as Letty's eyes snap open in shock. The bustling town streets stand bathed in bright morning light.
A tearful merchant woman offers Letty a fresh basket of bread.
A fisherman enthusiastically thanks Letty while offering her a fresh catch. A mother and son wave warmly as they greet the young lady. Letty looks overwhelmed while clutching her unexpected gifts.
Sector walks through town with Letty perched high on his shoulders. Glenn looks sheepish as Letty wonders why everyone is giving her credit for the magic salt idea. Sector explains that Glenn told everyone she was the one who actually thought of the plan. He mentions how even those unable to fish can now produce their own salt with her method.
A loud clench sounds as Sector excitedly declares the domain will soon be rich, nearly tipping Letty over.
Sector quickly apologizes for his over-enthusiastic outburst.
Sector notes the domain's newfound independence from foreign salt supplies.
He explains how other countries once monopolized rock salt deposits.
He recalls how powerful aristocrats hoarded the salt to keep prices artificially high.
Letty listens intently as Sector describes the difficulties the common people faced. She asks if they can profit from selling their surplus salt, but Sector disagrees. Sector explains that obtaining the legal right to sell salt is an incredibly risky endeavor. He warns that bulk production would draw unwanted attention and lead to their domain being shut down. The blonde man suddenly remembers something as they continue their walk. Sector asks if there's anything else Letty wants to find in Tan. Letty looks for items from her original world that might hold value here. A mocking irk sounds as Sector laughs at her serious demeanor. Letty scolds him for being flippant about the domain's poverty.
A rhythmic pull sounds as the frustrated girl yanks on Sector's air.
Sector smiles and notes that her concern for the domain proves she is truly Carlo's daughter. Letty is caught off guard by his sincere words.
Sector playfully warns her not to let Carlo hear her doubt her identity.
He laments that her rebellious phase started much earlier than he expected. A flashback reveals a younger Letty yelling at a worried Ladius. The young girl screams her hatred while Ladius stands completely shattered by her words. A sharp kercheck sounds as Sector finds Carlo collapsed on the floor with mushrooms growing around him. Sector recalls how Carlo was useless for an entire week after that incident. Letty realizes her father has always loved her regardless of which soul she was. Sector kneels and firmly tells Letty that she is the only daughter he recognizes.
A soft sniff sounds as Letty leans into her friend's shoulder in gratitude. A gentle pat sounds as Letty calls out to Sector emotionally.
A merchant notices the pair as they enter the market square. Two young girls named Lolo and Lin spot Letty and call out her ing. A rhythmic step sounds as the girls run towards Sector and Letty. Lin excitedly explains how they earned pocket money by making salt. Letty looks puzzled as the girls mention they bought sweet soup with their earnings. A cheerful soup vendor greets Letty as she approaches his stall. The man thanks her for the salt and credits her for his business's success. A steady pour sounds as the man offers Letty a bowl of soup on the house. Letty sees her own reflection in the warm, sweet liquid. Sector asks for a taste while Letty holds her treat close. A soft tip sounds as the girl takes a cautious sip of the warm, sweet soup. Her eyes widen in pure delight as the rich flavor of the soup surprises her. A wave of nostalgia washes over Letty as she recalls hazy memories of her grandmother in Japan. A quick whip sounds as the blonde man notices her sudden stillness and asks what is wrong. Letty asks about the ingredients, finding the intense sweetness of the liquid hard to believe. The source is revealed to be the local sugar beets grown in the domain's fields. A sudden gasp sounds as Letty realizes her grandmother used to grow the same plants in her garden. Letty questions why they aren't producing sugar, while the blonde man assumes only sugarcane works. The young lady explains the possibility of making sugar from beets, leaving her companions stunned. The local girls and the blonde man exchange looks of utter confusion at her cryptic suggestion. A firm grab sounds as the blonde man eagerly begs Letty to tell him more. Back at the manor, the girl's father warmly asks if she enjoyed her time outside in town. Letty beams with joy while confirming she had a wonderful experience. The gray-haired lord embraces his daughter, admitting how much he missed her while she was away. The blonde man interrupts the sentimental moment to urgently shift the focus to sugar production. Lord Carlo looks on with bewilderment as the blonde man mentions the potential breakthrough. The lord asks for clarification, assuming she is referring to traditional sugarcane methods. A sudden whip sounds as the blonde man confidently asserts that Letty has a new plan. The woman with glasses points out their lack of sugarcane, prompting Letty to explain her alternative. Letty details how they can utilize their existing beet crops to manufacture beet sugar. Her father and the woman with glasses admit they have never heard of such a thing. A quick hup sounds as Letty is lifted, wondering why no one had connected the soup to sugar before. The blonde man enthusiastically agrees to start the experimental process immediately. The scene shifts to the quiet kitchen where they begin their ambitious project. The necessary tools and a large sugar beet are prepared on the wooden table. Letty explains the first step of the simple process to the eager blonde man. She instructs him to dice the vegetable finely before placing it in heated water. The next step involves soaking the diced pieces in a cloth for a full hour. Letty describes how to remove the solids and carefully reduce the remaining liquid. The stock is slowly boiled down until it reaches the consistency of thick syrup. Excitement builds as the mixture begins to change color and texture on the wooden spoon. Letty advises stirring the cooling mixture, which the blonde man finds surprisingly labor-intensive. A rhythmic crackle sounds as the fire blazes, highlighting the heavy fuel requirements of the process. They watch with anticipation as the final stages of the experiment unfold. The mixture begins to thicken and solidify within the large metal pot. The blonde man carefully pours the hardening substance onto a clean white cloth. Letty explains that the final step is simply breaking the hardened sugar into smaller pieces. The trio celebrates their success in successfully producing high-quality sugar. The group stands together in the kitchen, exhausted but proud of their accomplishment. A quiet sidle sounds as the blonde man notices the Lord's presence and asks about his duties. A sudden lift sounds as Lord Carlo hoists Letty high, ignoring his work to praise her brilliance. A heavy rumble sounds as the woman with glasses scolds the Lord for neglecting his responsibilities. A sharp push sounds as she suddenly notices the results of their labor. The woman stares at the sugar in stunned silence, her irritation replaced by shock. A soft tee-hee-hee sounds as Letty basks in the praise and her own cleverness. The woman asks if this new discovery will finally bring wealth to their impoverished domain. The blonde man adopts a grave expression, explaining that they cannot start selling it yet. Letty wonders if the delay is due to the time needed to cultivate more beet crops. The blonde man confirms her suspicion while looking away thoughtfully. He warns that such a valuable secret would draw dangerous attention from the capital. Nations guard their sugar manufacturing and raw materials with extreme secrecy and strictness. Lord Carlo and the blonde man discuss the immense value of sugar in their current world. The woman with glasses warns that carelessness could lead to the domain being forced into a monoculture of sugar beets. Lord Carlo worries that such a shift would lead to a mass exodus of people from the capital into their domain. Lord Carlo notes that the original residents would likely be displaced with only meager compensation. The woman with glasses vehemently refuses to produce any sugar if it leads to such a disastrous outcome.
The blonde man agrees that foregoing sugar production is the safest path forward. The blonde man warns Letty that her ability to produce sugar would make her a target for forced marriage. He notes that even the second prince might demand her hand, defeating her goal of a quiet life. Letty protests her young age as a sudden clack and jolt sounds when the woman with glasses interrupts.
The woman with glasses points out that Letty's tomboyish nature and the domain's poverty are the only reasons she isn't already betrothed.
Letty is visibly horrified by the rigid social expectations of the world she now inhabits. A wave of gloom washes over Letty as she realizes the realities of this world are far harsher than anticipated. Lord Carlo tries to brighten the mood, and a sudden lift sounds as he reminds Letty she can now have all the sugar she wants. Letty beams with joy as she basks in the warmth of being praised for her discovery. The blonde man wonders about alternative uses for the sugar, while Letty reflects on her desire to save the domain from debt. Lord Carlo smiles warmly at his daughter, while Letty worries that selling their new products might prove impossible. Letty realizes she must devise a better plan while a sudden crash sounds in the background.
In the kitchen, the woman with glasses scolds the blonde man for his clumsy behavior. The blonde man sheepishly explains that he was simply trying to test the new sugar in some tea.
A sudden crash sounds, and Letty rushes toward the source while searching for her father. Letty watches as her stepmother claims Lord Carlo is merely tired and dismisses her to clean up a spill.
Letty brings tea to a cold and distant Lord Carlo, who tells her to leave because she makes his new wife sad.
Letty stands frozen in shock as she experiences her father's utter rejection in this vision of the future.
Back in the present, a sudden lift sounds as Lord Carlo expresses relief that Letty has finally snapped out of her trance.
Letty wonders if she was merely daydreaming or if she truly experienced a glimpse of her future. Letty urgently begs Lord Carlo to listen as she reveals the disturbing details she just remembered.
Lord Carlo listens intently as he begins to summarize the terrifying sequence of events Letty described.
Lord Carlo recounts the vision where a second wife turns him into a drugged and manipulated puppet.
Letty confirms the vision and admits she was afraid to reveal that he would eventually hurt her.
The blue-haired man summarizes the grim outcome where Letty is exiled and forced into an unwanted marriage. Lord Carlo agrees that they must act immediately to prevent this future from coming to pass. Lord Carlo vows never to remarry, but warns that they must find another way to protect Letty's future. Lord Carlo acknowledges Letty's maturity and asks her to help him decide on a path forward. Letty looks on with curiosity as she asks her father to reveal his plans. Lord Carlo warns that they will likely start receiving betrothal requests for her within a few years.
Lord Carlo maintains a serious and focused expression as the gravity of their situation sinks in.
The blonde man proposes that he and Letty become commoners and flee to another domain once she turns 8.
The blonde man explains his intent to find a safe and secure location for their new lives.
He worries that outside domains might be even more dangerous and filled with savage people. Lord Carlo believes this plan offers Letty the highest chance of escaping her predicted fate.
Lord Carlo suggests a second option of Letty marrying someone else before the prince can claim her. Letty considers the weight of these choices while feeling deeply conflicted about leaving her home. Letty realizes her love for Sentencia is too strong to consider leaving it behind.
Letty passionately declares her refusal to leave her father or become a nobleman's wife.
The woman with glasses agrees that Letty's spirited personality makes the marriage plan entirely unfeasible.
Lord Carlo prepares to reveal a third suggestion that would allow Letty to remain in the domain.
Lord Carlo warns that this final path will bind Letty to the domain for the rest of her life. Letty asks for more information as Lord Carlo suggests she swear an oath to the Spirit King. Swearing the oath would ensure her protection, but would permanently prevent her from moving away from the domain.
Lord Carlo looks down at Letty with a serious and contemplative expression. Lord Carlo offers a gentle and encouraging smile.
Lord Carlo explains that anyone who becomes the lord of this domain must ask the Spirit King for permission before they can move out of the territory.
Lord Carlo describes how he swore an oath to the Spirit King and became his servant to gain divine protection for the domain, but the cost is that he can never leave.
Letty considers her father's words, realizing that if she swears an oath to the Spirit King, no one, not even the king or the second prince, could force her to leave or enter an unwanted engagement.
A sudden clench sounds as Letty grips her dress, wondering if making such a permanent commitment will be fine since she is currently inhabiting someone else's body.
A soft reach sounds as Letty reflects on how the original Letty might have tried this method and still ended up punished, making her fear that a tragic outcome is inevitable. Lord Carlo urges Letty to give the matter proper thought before reaching a final decision because the consequences are so significant. A sudden grip sounds as Lord Carlo maintains his serious focus on Letty's choice. Letty's wide green eye reflects her intense internal struggle. Letty remains focused on her friends while thinking that this path is the best method for her to take right now. Letty enthusiastically shouts that the plan sounds great to her. Lord Carlo agrees to the plan but insists that Letty still take some time to really think it over. A quick reach sounds as the narrative notes that this is not the kind of decision one should make in the heat of the moment. The group decides that if Letty still feels the same way in 10 days, they will go to request the Spirit King's protection, though there is no guarantee she will receive it. Sitting together in the drawing room, Letty confirms she understands the gravity and the weight involved in her choice. A rhythmic clack sounds as the scene shifts toward a new topic. The blonde man smiles broadly while clarifying that they aren't giving up on the idea of sugar production entirely. Letty sips her tea while the blonde man explains their continued interest in the product. The woman with glasses suggests that they can focus on growing the sugar beets and leave the actual manufacturing to stronger domains in exchange for a portion of the profits. The blonde man wonders if such a deal would be a ripoff for their domain. The blonde man explains that since theirs is a poor domain, having a sudden, disproportionate amount of money would only serve to invite misfortune. The blue-haired man points out that they must first strengthen themselves to earn more, leading Letty to reflect on how harsh the realities of this world truly are. The blonde man points out that since they can produce salt, they can begin selling dried foods and other processed items while they consider their next moves. The woman with glasses emphasizes that the first priority is determining which domains are trustworthy and figuring out the best way to cultivate the sugar beets. In the distance, the massive white tiger spirit rests as the narrative notes that they need permission from the Spirit King before they can expand the area of their fields. Lord Carlo says he will ask for that permission when he takes Letty to the woods to request her personal protection. Letty lets out a loud shout of excitement that echoes through the manor. Lord Carlo asks Letty one last time if she is truly sure about her decision. Letty looks at him with total resolve and confirms with a simple yes. Letty declares her intent to ask the Spirit King for protection to change her future and prevent her soul from being fully assimilated into this world. A soft exhale sounds as Lord Carlo accepts her answer and says, "Okay." A sudden lift sounds as Lord Carlo hoists Letty up and prepares to head toward the woods. They enter a deep, ancient forest filled with massive trees and floating orbs of light. A sudden whoa sounds as Letty marvels at the overwhelming atmosphere of spirituality in the woods, while Lord Carlo prepares to speak. Lord Carlo warns Letty that they are about to enter the territory of the Spirit King and that she must be careful not to do anything to offend him. A heavy rumble sounds as they walk deeper into the sacred forest. A sudden thwop sounds as Letty grips her father's sleeve in fear. A sudden roar sounds, causing Letty to feel incredibly nervous as they approach the center of the territory. A massive white tiger with striking blue eyes and decorative tassels on its ears walks calmly through the grass. A sudden flinch sounds as Letty cowers behind her father's coat. A sudden nod sounds as Lord Carlo places a hand on Letty and reassures her that everything is okay. A sudden lift sounds as the white tiger opens its mouth and speaks, simply saying, "I see." The Spirit King stares directly at Letty and comments that her soul is quite fascinating. A sudden shine sounds as Letty stares up in wide-eyed shock. A sudden flare sounds as a brilliant light erupts, forcing Letty to shield her eyes. A sudden float sounds as Letty finds herself drifting in a glowing, ethereal void, wondering where she is. Letty looks around the sparkling dimension in confusion, wondering why she is floating. A sudden glance sounds as Letty looks around in a panic, searching for her father and the Spirit King. A sudden clack sounds as a large, shadowy figure appears and tells Letty to quiet down. A tall, humanoid figure with long, silver hair and pointed ears stands in a glowing, golden void. Letty's wide green eye reflects her utter shock as she wonders who this mysterious man is. Letty notes that the man's striking blue eyes are identical to those of the white tiger. Letty realizes with a start that the man and the massive white tiger are the same being, the Spirit King. A sudden wah sounds as Letty waves her arms while floating helplessly in front of the Spirit King. The Spirit King explains that they are currently within a spiritual world existing inside Letty's own mind. Letty is visibly startled by the revelation that she is in a spiritual world.
The Spirit King promises that their oath will bind them and he will grant her the protection she seeks. The Spirit King confirms that because Letty is Carlo's daughter, her request for an oath will not be rejected.
Letty is relieved and thanks him while thinking that the process is much simpler than she expected. The Spirit King warns that as she receives protection, her memories will be summoned, which will strain her soul.
A sudden ba-dump sounds as Letty's heart races in anticipation of the ritual. A sudden thwap sounds as Letty determinedly confirms her readiness for the process.
A soft reach sounds as the Spirit King prepares to begin the ritual.
A sudden shine sounds as a brilliant blue magic circle glows from the Spirit King's hand. The glowing blue magic circle hovers over Letty as the protection begins to take hold. A sudden whoosh sounds as images of Japan appear, while Letty wonders if these are her memories. A dazed sounds as the focus shifts toward Letty's deep-seated memories of her past life.
Letty recalls her previous father and how he would often cook her favorite food.
A sudden bam sounds as Letty vividly remembers a bowl of delicious miso ramen. A sudden shine sounds as the Spirit King looks intrigued while repeating the name of the dish. A sudden zap sounds as Letty cries out in sudden and intense pain.
Letty gasps as her head begins to ache, forcing the Spirit King to pause the procedure.
A sudden snap sounds as the Spirit King's fingers drift apart, terminating the ritual midway.
Letty collapses to the ground, breathing heavily as she recovers from the shock.
A sparkle sounds as Letty marvels at her glowing hands and asks why her body is radiant. A sudden stand sounds as the Spirit King explains the glow represents divine protection. Letty thanks him for the gift but remains puzzled by the strange experience she just had. The Spirit King leans in and asks Letty to explain what miso ramen is.
Letty blushes intensely while gaping at the Spirit King and thinking about how handsome he is.
The Spirit King admits he peeked at her memories, prompting Letty to explain ramen is a dish from her world. The Spirit King looks confused and asks Letty to define what a dish is. Letty describes ramen as long noodles that people eat by slurping them up. Letty drools as she describes the rich miso soup and the secret recipe her previous father used. Letty laments that she hasn't been able to eat ramen since coming to this new world. A sudden suck sounds as the Spirit King manifests a bowl and begins slurping the noodles loudly. Letty is shocked and demands to know why he is eating the food she described. A sudden drink sounds as the Spirit King tilts the bowl and gulps down the rest of the soup. A sudden pwa sounds as the Spirit King exhales and declares that miso ramen is truly delicious. An irk sounds as Letty complains about the unfairness while the Spirit King says the dish looked good. A sudden pop sounds as the Spirit King manifests a bear and sweets to show he can make anything. A sudden whoa sounds as Letty looks on in amazement at the objects he has created. The Spirit King instructs Letty to leave for now and return in 1 week. The Spirit King explains that he stopped the process because the soul strain was becoming too dangerous for her. Letty realizes that her memory retrieval was cut short and remains incomplete. Letty notes that while she saw her father making ramen, his face was still blurry and unrecognizable. Letty looks away with a troubled expression as she realizes something is still worrying her. The Spirit King warns that the future Letty has seen is quite concerning even to him. Letty's wide green eye reflects her growing alarm at his serious tone. The Spirit King explains that it should be impossible for any protected individual to be harmed in any way. Letty's eyes widen in shock as the Spirit King reveals a dark prophecy about her father being poisoned by his future wife. Divine protection creates an unbreakable bond. A soft lift sounds while the Spirit King addresses the small glowing girl. The Spirit King's expression grows grim as he contemplates the possibility of his power being weakened. The Spirit King faces his mortality. Letty's gaze falls as she struggles to process the heavy news. A sudden dash sounds as Letty frantically asks why only another Spirit King would be able to harm him. The Spirit King admits that while a conflict between spirits is unthinkable, he cannot explain why it is happening. A firm clench sounds as Letty grips her dress, troubled by the thought of the Spirit King being destroyed. A sudden shine sounds as the Spirit King instructs Letty to return to the woods in 1 week. A sudden turn sounds as the Spirit King bids her farewell, while Letty desperately begs him to wait. The Spirit King pauses his departure and asks if she has any other requests. Letty realizes she has one more important favor to ask for her family. She earnestly asks for permission to expand the amount of land their domain can use for farming. The Spirit King grants his permission, stating they can use the plains as long as the forest remains untouched. Letty is stunned by his kindness. A quick breath sounds as Letty thanks him profusely for the unexpected help. Letty is amazed by how easy it was to get his approval.
The Spirit King clarifies that he never actually forbade the humans from planting crops on the plains. He explains that he gave the humans permission to use as much land as they needed a century ago. He reiterates that while the woods are off limits, the rest of the land is available for their use. A sudden shine sounds as the Spirit King notes that humans are simply another part of the natural world.
Lord Carlo's voice rings out in a panic as he calls for his daughter.
A soft blink sounds as Letty slowly opens her eyes and groggily calls out for her father. A sudden ba-dump sounds as her father leans over her, overwhelmed with relief that she is finally awake. Letty is confused to find herself lying in her own bed back at the manor. A sudden thwop sounds as Lord Carlo pulls Letty into a crushing emotional hug. A soft clack sounds as Lord Carlo explains that she has been unconscious for 4 days. A soft sniffle sounds while the blonde man and the woman with glasses watch on with tears of relief. Letty realizes that the spiritual strain of meeting the Spirit King must have caused her to pass out. She apologizes for worrying everyone and explains that she successfully obtained the king's protection. Lord Carlo pats Letty's head, happy to hear the mission was a success. The blonde man asks if the protection means her memories of her past life will stop disappearing. Letty confirms her memories should be safe now, but notes she must return to finish the retrieval process. The blonde man is ecstatic when Letty shares that they have permission to increase their farmland. He joyfully hoists Letty into the air, celebrating the coming prosperity of their domain. The blonde man notices Lord Carlo sulking and points him out to Sector. A heavy gloom settles over Lord Carlo as he crouches alone in the corner of the room. The woman with glasses explains that Lord Carlo is jealous because he wasn't the first person to hold Letty. Lord Carlo continues to pout while his friend tells him he really needs to learn to read the room.
Letty stares off into space, lost in her own thoughts.
A soft nod sounds as Letty realizes the Spirit King's destruction is the key to how her father was manipulated. The 3 companions stand together, unaware of the internal struggle Letty is facing. The blonde man asks if there is anything else she can recall about the future. Letty searches her mind for any other clues about the coming disaster. A sudden gasp sounds as Letty realizes that only an incredibly powerful being could destroy a Spirit King. She remembers an in-game description of origami, malevolent spirits that absorb others to become dark gods. Letty cries out in alarm as she remembers that an origami event was part of the original story. A soft stare sounds as Letty looks at her father with a newfound sense of dread. Letty notes that everyone in this world is remarkably handsome and would likely be popular anywhere. Letty wonders if any of her companions have lovers, given how many admirers they must have, but the blonde man playfully claims he only wants to focus on her. The blonde man offers a mischievous smirk while suggesting that since they are all adults, certain things are to be expected. Sector explains that he remains single because he refuses to engage in insincere relationships, firmly stating that love is a serious matter. The blonde man bursts into laughter while jokingly wondering who Sector could possibly be referring to. Sector points his staff directly at the blonde man to confirm he is the insincere one, while Letty watches the exchange feeling incredibly awkward. A sharp clack sounds as Sector scolds his friend for constantly sweet-talking women, dismissing his behavior as completely fake. A sudden thwop sounds as the blonde man panics and begs Sector not to talk about his dating habits in front of Letty. Sector ignores the plea and advises the blonde man to court only one lady at a time, leaving Letty sweating in a moment of pure secondhand embarrassment. Letty immediately regrets her casual curiosity after the conversation takes such an unexpected and uncomfortable turn. A vision appears of the Spirit Kings, legendary beings who wield immense power over the natural world. Within their specific domains, these spirits are said to possess strength that rivals the gods themselves. A soft, floaty sounds as a dark story unfolds about a certain noble who viewed a Spirit King as a mere obstacle to their goals. This individual was the daughter of a wealthy domain who was destined to become the primary candidate to marry the second prince. A firm clench sounds as the noble girl recalls her jealousy toward Letty, whose magical talent and social presence outshined her despite coming from a poor domain. She devised a cruel scheme to ruin Letty's home domain by eliminating its guardian Spirit King and drowning the land in debt. Eventually, she encountered a mysterious sorcerer who claimed to have the power to destroy Spirit Kings. The sorcerer began his dark work by capturing young, weak spirits to use as fuel for his magic. Through a forbidden process known as malevolent transformations, he twisted these spirits into dark, vengeful gods. These corrupted entities descended upon Sentencia and consumed its guardian spirit king to further increase their own power. Deprived of its divine protection, the crops of Sentencia withered away, leaving the domain in a state of financial ruin. Letty speaks of the past and notes that the noble girl's plan for misfortune to befall her family was a complete success.
Letty struggles to process the overwhelming information regarding sorcerers and the possibility of turning spirits into malevolent gods. Letty realizes this was the origami event from the original game, and she is frustrated that she forgot such a vital piece of her past life's knowledge. Another realization dawns on her.
She identifies the villainous candidate as Mariette, the very person responsible for condemning Letty to death simply out of spite. A sharp clench sounds as Letty realizes Mariette has been targeting her since they were both children. Lord Carlo watches his daughter with a silent, contemplative expression.
A soft rub sounds as Lord Carlo gently pats Letty's head and encourages her to share whatever is weighing on her mind.
Lord Carlo offers a warm smile to reassure her. Letty claims she is fine, but admits she is trying to figure out the best way to protect themselves against Mariette. Lord Carlo solemnly agrees with her assessment of the situation. The blonde man calls out to Letty to get her attention. He asks her if she can recall any specific details about the appearance or nature of the sorcerer.
A soft shake sounds as Letty tries to remember, but she laments that she can't recall anything about the sorcerer's identity. She is deeply frustrated that she cannot even visualize the sorcerer's face despite their importance to the story.
A sudden clatter sounds as the blonde man suggests they head to the meeting room to begin drafting a proper strategy. A soft jump sounds while Letty prepares to leave the bed and follow the others. Lord Carlo remains focused on Letty, his thoughts preoccupied with her role in the coming conflict.
A sudden gasp sounds as Letty is startled by her father's intense focus.
A sudden scoop sounds as Lord Carlo lifts Letty into his arms, apologizing for being lost in his own head as they head out. Letty looks at him with a puzzled expression as he carries her.
The light fades as the day comes to an end over the manor.
The scene shifts back to the quiet of the bedroom later that evening.
A soft tug sounds as Letty sleepily pulls at her father's sleeve and calls for him. Lord Carlo comforts her with a gentle touch and assures her that he is right there by her side.
Letty notes that Lord Carlo has been acting strangely and urges him to get some rest since he looks exhausted.
Lord Carlo looks down at his daughter with a soft, affectionate gaze.
A sudden thwomp sounds as Lord Carlo agrees and immediately lies down in bed next to Letty, much to her shock. Lord Carlo asks if he did something wrong, while a flustered Letty frantically insists that everything is perfectly fine. Letty's face turns bright red as she realizes that having her adult memories makes sleeping in the same bed as such a handsome man incredibly stressful. Lord Carlo lies next to Letty, looking at her with a gentle expression. Letty's internal monologue highlights her frustration at being treated like a child when she feels like a mature adult inside. Letty blushes as she starts to rationalize and accept their close proximity, despite her embarrassment. A sudden jolt sounds while Letty is struck by the intense beauty of her father's eyes up close. A quick flop sounds as a flustered Letty frantically tries to hide her embarrassment and claims it is nothing. A massive hug sounds as Lord Carlo pulls Letty close to his chest in an emotional embrace. Lord Carlo reassures Letty that she is safe while she remains completely overwhelmed by the sudden contact.
Lord Carlo speaks with deep determination about the difficult choices they must face to secure their future. Lord Carlo makes a solemn promise to protect Letty from any harm that may come.
Lord Carlo speaks to Letty about the origami today while she asks him what is troubling him.
Lord Carlo tells Letty it is late and time to sleep while she softly agrees to rest. A sudden firm grip sounds as Lord Carlo clenches the fabric in anxiety, making Letty worry about the weight on his mind.
2 days pass as the scene shifts to the lush trees of the forest. Louvet, the Spirit King, sits with the group in a forest clearing to discuss their strategy against the sorcerer. Lord Carlo holds Letty as she details her memories of the gods and the sorcerer's dark transformations at the entrance to the Spirit Woods. Louvet admits that he currently possesses no information regarding the sorcerer's true identity. The blonde man asks Louvet to use his power to see if he can recall anything useful about the threat. Louvet agrees to help the blonde man recover his memories as part of their meeting today. Louvet prepares to begin the memory retrieval process for the group. Lord Carlo calls out to Louvet to get his attention before they proceed with the magic. Louvet asks Lord Carlo what he wants to discuss so urgently. A sudden stand sounds as Lord Carlo rises to ask Louvet a serious question concerning the gods.
Lord Carlo requests official permission from the Spirit King to leave the domain. The blonde man is shocked by Lord Carlo's plan to hunt down and locate the real identity of the sorcerer.
Lord Carlo explains his intention to step down as domain leader to investigate the marriage candidates for the prince. The blonde man is left speechless and visibly distressed by Lord Carlo's drastic announcement.
A sudden grab sounds as the blonde man demands to know how Lord Carlo can abandon the domain and his promise to protect Letty.
Lord Carlo remains focused and confirms his absolute commitment to protecting his daughter through these actions.
Letty watches her father with a sad and worried expression, feeling the weight of his sacrifice. The woman with glasses and Sector discuss the necessity of the search to identify the dangerous sorcerer as a first step.
Lord Carlo feels responsible for the tragedy Letty faced in her past lives and is willing to sacrifice himself to atone for it. Letty realizes that her father had already made up his mind while he was lost in thought the previous day.
Lord Carlo asks the blonde man if he can suggest any other way to handle the coming disaster. A sudden grab sounds as Lord Carlo insists that they have no other choice but to follow his plan. A rhythmic pant sounds as Lord Carlo catches his breath while the others watch him in stunned silence. Louvet coldly rejects Lord Carlo's proposal, stating that there is no longer any point in it.
The group is completely taken aback and confused by Louvet's sudden refusal.
Louvet reveals the terrifying news that the origami has likely already been born. Louvet explains that the entity is likely consuming spirits from other regions to gain the strength needed to challenge him.
Letty suggests that the origami's massive size would make it easy to spot if it were to attack.
Louvet asks Letty if she knows what the creature looks like. Louvet looks upward with a focused and serious expression.
A massive bam sounds as a giant eye-covered purple blob appears right behind the Spirit King.
Louvet stares in disbelief as the creature looms over the entire group.
Letty cries out in alarm as she asks if the origami is appearing now of all times.
The dark, menacing form of the origami towers over Letty in the forest clearing.
Lord Carlo and the blonde man lean over Letty and ask her if she is finally awake.
A sharp shink sounds as a massive ice structure encases the group to shield them from the monster's reach.
Lord Carlo holds Letty securely within the safety of the crystalline magic.
A quick clink-clink sounds as shards hit the crystal wall while the group wonders what to do now that the origami is right there.
Louvet looks frustrated as he prepares to shift forms, with his white tiger counterpart appearing beside him. A massive roar sounds as the white tiger declares he is transforming for battle.
A worried crowd watches the escalating confrontation, their faces filled with anxiety.
A sharp clack sounds as the white tiger's eyes glow and he commands everyone to be at the ready.
A sudden whoosh sounds as the ice barrier is hit, followed by a loud bam and a rhythmic ka-clink as it struggles to hold against the darkness.
The white tiger is stunned when he realizes his attack had no effect on the monster.
Letty explains that the origami is a god, which is why physical attacks are useless against it.
A sudden gasp sounds from Lord Carlo as he frantically suggests they must flee since they cannot fight.
A soft swoosh sounds while Lord Carlo holds Letty tight and shards of ice swirl around them. A thunderous roar sounds as a sharp shink echoes, the origami looming ominously over the ice barrier.
Letty is amazed that her father was able to manifest such a powerful ice barrier instantly. A loud roar sounds as the origami spits out a defiant insult, refusing to be absorbed by the brute.
A low crumble sounds as the ice begins to fail, and Lord Carlo worries the barrier won't hold while the monster's roar continues. A sudden thwop sounds as Letty is thrown into the air, crying out for Sector as she falls.
A soft thwump sounds as Sector catches her with a firm grab, shocked by the sudden turn of events. Lord Carlo looks back with a final, desperate instruction for Sector to take care of Letty.
Sector is left speechless, his expression mirroring the gravity of the situation.
Letty watches in terror as she realizes what her father intends to do.
A sharp ka-clink sounds as Lord Carlo presses his hands against the fracturing ice.
A sudden swoosh sounds as a gasp escapes him, Lord Carlo realizing things have gone horribly wrong.
A terrifying roar sounds while the Spirit King grunts in pain, both being pulled toward the monster's maw.
A sudden grab sounds as Lord Carlo reaches out and latches onto the Spirit King's massive paw.
A rhythmic pull sounds as Lord Carlo desperately tries to anchor himself and the Spirit King.
Letty screams for her father while Sector holds her back, warning her that it is far too dangerous to move.
A sharp crack sounds as the ice beneath Lord Carlo gives way, prompting a startled reaction. The group watches in horror as Lord Carlo and the White Tiger are pulled toward the dark mass. A frantic cry for Lord Carlo echoes as he is swept away by the monster's pull. A sudden whoosh sounds as a quick thwop follows, Lord Carlo reaching out into the blinding light one last time.
A sudden shoot sounds followed by a massive smash as Lord Carlo uses his magic to ensure the safety of those left behind.
A soft creak sounds as Lord Carlo lets out a pained grunt, exhausted by the effort. A massive roar sounds as a rhythmic swoosh swoosh accompanies Lord Carlo and the Spirit King being swallowed by the darkness. The White Tiger lets out a final, pained grunt as the shadows close in. A sudden thwop sounds as Sector pulls a screaming Letty away, warning her that she will be sucked in as well. A loud roar sounds as a sudden whoosh echoes, the woman with glasses urging them to get behind her for safety. The woman with black hair apologizes profusely, feeling helpless because she cannot use battle ice magic.
Letty is haunted by her father's final plea for her protection.
A thunderous roar sounds while the group desperately calls out to Lord Carlo, questioning his final words.
A faint whisper of an apology is the last thing heard from him.
Letty is frozen in grief, her eyes wide with the trauma of the loss. A soft exhale sounds as Lord Carlo faces his fate with a calm, resigned expression.
A sudden slip sounds as the last trace of her father vanishes into the void.
Letty remembers how her father always protected and supported her, even after her past life memories returned.
Her sadness turns to fierce determination as she refuses to let such a kind person die.
Letty declares it is her turn to protect her father, leaving Sector completely bewildered. Letty closes her eyes in deep concentration, desperately trying to recall the details of the origami event from the game. She reflects on how the main character was able to defeat the origami in the original story. A vision of a blonde girl reaching out appears in her mind.
A sudden gasp sounds as an epiphany hits her, and she realizes what must be done.
A sudden whoosh sounds as the woman with glasses tells Letty to stop because it's too dangerous.
Sector looks at Letty with deep concern, asking her what she is planning to do.
Letty makes a sudden, firm decision.
A brilliant shine sounds while Letty tells herself she must act immediately.
A sudden whoosh sounds, followed by a sharp clink as Letty motivates herself to use her power. A quick pop sounds while the blonde man questions Letty's actions as she resolves to use her body's inherent magic to replicate Lord Carlo's barrier. A low growl sounds, followed by a sudden whoosh, while Letty successfully manifests a massive structure of ice magic.
A sudden leap sounds as Letty jumps into the air.
Lord Carlo watches the scene unfold with an expression of pure disbelief. A thunderous roar sounds while the White Tiger looks on and questions Letty's intentions. Letty recalls her knowledge of how the game's protagonist originally handled the situation. A thunderous roar sounds as Letty thinks about how the monster was previously defeated. A vision of the game world shows the protagonist discovering a legendary item in a dungeon. Letty remembers that an otherworldly ribbon was the key to defeating the god. She recalls that the glowing ribbon was eventually consumed by the entity during the final battle.
A brilliant shine sounds as Letty reflects on how the creature's body rejected the foreign object, leading to its destruction.
Ladius, the blonde man, and Murray watch the events with terrified expressions.
Letty falls through the sky, realizing that her own soul acts as the otherworldly element needed. A sudden thwop sounds as Lord Carlo screams for Lay.
Letty looks back with a final, determined thought about sacrificing everything to save her father. A low rumble sounds while Letty is pulled into the dark abyss. Letty finds herself in a mysterious void and wonders where she has been taken. Letty floats through the starlit darkness with a confused expression.
She stares at the glowing orbs and realizes the truth of her location.
A vision of her original life in Japan appears, showing her past self working in a restaurant. A sudden clamor sounds while Letty reflects on her former life as an average girl who helped her father. She compares her plain appearance to the stunning beauty of the people in the game world. Lord Carlo, the blonde man, Murray, and Latius appear in her mind as examples of the world's beauty.
A soft murmur sounds as Letty wonders if her father would be disappointed if he saw her true form.
A sudden flush sounds as Letty becomes flustered, telling herself she will never meet him in her original body anyway. A soft laugh sounds, followed by a sudden pause as Letty realizes her father's affection is meant for his daughter.
Letty begins to cry as she wonders why her heart feels so heavy.
A soft sniffle sounds while Letty curls up and begins a quiet countdown. The glowing orbs swirl together as the void begins to shift. A sudden flap sounds as a mysterious voice commands the pledged one to wake up.
A soft blink sounds as Letty awakens in the forest clearing, surrounded by her worried companions and several spirits.
Ladius, the blonde man, and Murray frantically check on Letty to see if she is unharmed. Letty remains dazed as she slowly processes that she is still alive.
A sudden grab sounds as Lord Carlo pulls Letty into a desperate embrace. A rhythmic clench sounds while Lord Carlo expresses his immense relief, making Letty realize that she is truly safe. The blonde man berates Letty for her recklessness while secretly admitting how glad he is that she survived. A soft sniffle and hic sound while Murray cries and scolds Letty for nearly getting herself killed.
Ladius looks at Letty with a relieved expression and tells her how glad he is that she is safe.
A soft sniffle sounds as Letty notices the red eyes of her friends and realizes they have all been crying for her.
Letty offers a tearful smile and apologizes to the group for the scare she gave them.
The story prepares to transition to the next stage of their journey.
A sudden gasp sounds as Letty asks where the monster went, only for Lord Carlo to reassure her. A sudden blaze and foosh sound as Lord Carlo explains that the creature vanished in a pillar of light after swallowing her. A sudden whip sounds as the group thanks Letty for saving them, though they still object to her dangerous methods. A soft stare sounds while Letty notices two unknown girls watching her with curiosity. The two spirits thank Letty for her help and tell her they were able to escape because of her actions. The three spirit kings offer their collective gratitude to Letty. Letty feels faint as she realizes these are spirit kings from other domains. Letty is shocked to realize the Aragami had captured the spirit kings as well. Numerous other spirits chime in to express their personal thanks.
Her attention is taken by a sudden, heavy thwump sounding as she collapses.
A soft blink sounds while Letty groggily opens her eyes.
Letty wakes up in bed and asks if she is returned to her room. The gray-haired man nods silently in response to her question.
Letty decides to sneak out of bed quietly to avoid waking the tired man. A sudden jolt sounds as the man startles awake and apologizes for missing her awakening. Letty offers a bright smile while wishing her father a good morning. The gray-haired man smiles back warmly as he greets his daughter. A quick clatter and creak sound while he asks how she is feeling. He expresses his deep concern regarding Letty's habit of pushing herself too hard. Letty counters by reminding him of his own reckless behavior during the battle. He concedes the point and gives her his heartfelt thanks for saving everyone. A soft murmur sounds as he asks if she only sees herself as Letty. A sudden slip and gasp sound as he pulls his hand away and apologizes for bothering her. Letty frantically requests more head pats, insisting she isn't bothered at all. She admits that she actually enjoys being treated like a child. Letty reflects privately on the pain of being viewed as a replacement for her past self. She acknowledges a father's natural desire to dote on his true daughter.
A heavy silence fills the room as they sit together on the bed.
A sudden jolt sounds when he calls out Letty's name. He expresses a deep desire to understand the thoughts she keeps hidden. He mentions the struggle of being caught between an adult mind and a child's body. He pledges to make her life in this new world as easy as possible. He asks Letty to be honest about her current feelings. Letty remains quiet, processing his sincere words. She realizes that she must speak the truth for him to truly understand. She worries that her confession might cause him to despise her. A soft cover sounds as he places his hand over hers to offer comfort. He tells her she is precious simply because of who she is. He looks at her with an expression of unwavering paternal love. He admits his past despair, but explains how Letty's arrival changed everything. Letty is stunned to learn about her father's secret struggles. A rhythmic grumble sounds in a memory of young Letty bringing him food and flowers. He recalls how her youthful kindness made him realize he needed to stop brooding. Letty leans against her father as she absorbs his emotional story. He credits Letty as the sole reason he was able to endure the last 3 years. He firmly assures her that she is not a replacement for anyone. He gently wipes her tears while reiterating how much she matters to him. Letty notes in her diary that their conversation has cleared the weight from her chest. He repeats his heartfelt promise that she is loved for her own sake. Letty reflects on how they managed to defeat the Aragami without casualties. A soft scritch sounds as Letty writes about the return to ordinary life. A rhythmic scritch sounds while she notes that many challenges remain ahead. She considers the economic needs of the domain, such as salt and sugar. Letty identifies Mariette as a dangerous character that requires extreme caution. She looks at a vision of the gallows, determined to avoid Letty's execution. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rhythmic knock-knock sounding, followed by a heavy kerchak and sharp clack as the door is unlocked and opened.
Mireille, the strawberry blonde woman with glasses, enters while carrying a wooden crate of vegetables and asking Letty why she is busy at the table.
Mireille says she is just following orders, but Letty explains she is taking notes on recent events for safekeeping. Mireille suggests they move on to their scheduled lessons, prompting a horrified Letty to frantically refuse the idea.
The scene shifts to the quiet and well-stocked kitchen area.
A large pot of thick stew begins a rhythmic simmer, sounding as it cooks on the stove.
Mireille asks Letty why she suddenly wanted to cook stew and what her ultimate goal is for the meal.
Letty offers a cheerful smile while suggesting they attempt to freeze-dry the food. Mireille looks completely baffled by the unfamiliar terminology.
Letty realizes that the concept of freeze-drying is entirely unknown to the people of this fantasy world.
Letty asks Mireille to hold her spoon so she can demonstrate the process using her own abilities.
A sudden whoosh sounds while Letty prepares to channel her magical energy. A sudden whoosh and sharp clink sound while Letty places her hands over the pot to activate her ice magic. A sudden swiddish and rhythmic clink sound followed by a soft fizzle and dry sound while the moisture is pulled from the food inside the pot.
Mireille watches the demonstration with a look of pure astonishment. Mireille observes with shock that the stew has been completely dehydrated into a dry state.
Mireille asks how Letty achieved such a result while Letty giggles proudly.
Letty explains that she achieved the result by changing her perspective on how to apply her magic. She uses a carrot diagram to explain the process of freezing moisture and then releasing the magic to leave the food dehydrated. Mireille expresses her admiration for the clever concept, while Letty reflects on how she discovered her talent for ice magic during the battle with the origami.
Letty admits she felt motivated to test the limits of her new abilities after seeing what she could do in the recent conflict. Letty enthusiastically points out the numerous practical benefits of the freeze-drying process. She explains how the food becomes lightweight and long-lasting, making it ideal for travel and storage in a backpack.
Mireille is impressed by Letty's foresight, and Letty suggests they could even use the technique to export goods to other domains. The two continue their discussion while standing near the large stove in the brightly lit kitchen.
Letty is filled with excitement until she suddenly notices a flaw in her creation and cries out in surprise.
A sudden mushy sound is noted as Letty realizes the food hasn't been properly dehydrated yet.
Mireille asks if the experiment failed, and Letty admits she didn't expect to succeed on her very first try.
Mireille notes that the idea came from Letty's original world, prompting Letty to confirm her suspicions. Letty recalls a memory of her past life in Japan, sitting in front of a television. She remembers watching a special documentary about a factory that specialized in the freeze-drying process. The memory shows diagrams of freezers and the scientific process of sublimation used to dry fruits like kiwis and oranges. Letty admits that she must have made a mistake in trying to replicate the complex original method.
Mireille listens intently and mentions that a new idea has just occurred to her while listening to the explanation.
A sudden flop sounds while Mireille pulls on her brown gloves and asks for permission to try the magic herself.
A title card introduces Chapter 34 of the story.
A sudden swoosh and sharp clink sound as Mireille, the domain's lead sorceress, effortlessly channels her superior magic over the pot. The stew in the pot is instantly transformed into a perfectly dry state. A heavy silence fills the room as Letty and Mireille stare at the successful result of Mireille's magic.
A sudden shake and flop sound while a flustered Mireille explains that the magic required is actually very difficult to regulate.
Mireille explains she boosted her magic because Letty mentioned a specific low temperature, though Letty claims she never mentioned that detail.
A sudden gasp sounds as Letty realizes she may have accidentally over-explained the scientific requirements.
Marie is surprised by Letty's sudden realization and asks what she has seen. Letty excitedly explains that they simply need to fine-tune the strength of the magic being applied.
She admits that her own attempt was lacking the necessary power to complete the drying.
Letty turns to Mireille and points out that her attempt was far too powerful.
A sudden swoosh sounds while Letty proposes they find a middle ground to achieve the perfect result.
A sudden swoosh and clink sound while the two work together, placing their hands over the pot to combine their knowledge. Mireille narrows her eyes in intense concentration as she carefully adjusts her magical output.
A sudden fizzle and dry sound while the food successfully transitions into its ideal dehydrated form.
Letty cheers as she successfully dehydrates the food, while Mireille praises her growing mastery over magical control. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp clack sounding as Mireille questions how the food is meant to be consumed. Her attention is taken by a sudden, rhythmic step sounding as Letty requests that the pot be moved to the nearby table. A sudden clatter sounds while Mireille pours the dried stew into a wooden bowl at Letty's request.
A rhythmic glub-glub sounds while Letty begins to pour hot water over the dehydrated meal.
A sudden rhythmic steam sounds while the stew successfully returns to its original moist state. Her attention is taken by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Marie realizes the massive potential for exporting the product. Mireille begins to inquire about the details of the freeze-drying process while Letty listens intently.
Sector, the blonde man with a brown scarf, asks who she is calling a wicked merchant, while Letty wonders if they are talking about him, and Mireille questions if the reports have been made.
A sudden bam sounds while Letty sheepishly admits that she might not have reported the success because she was unsure of the results. A sudden twinkle sounds while Mireille's eye glows behind her glasses in response to the confession. A sudden bam sounds while Mireille slams her hand on the table and declares the situation unacceptable. Mireille shouts about the need for state secrecy to avoid orders from adventurers and the military, while a startled Letty cries out in shock. Mireille glares intensely while asking if Letty is truly foolish, prompting the girl to apologize for her oversight. A sudden clack and long sigh sound as Mireille walks away, resigned to the current situation. Mireille warns Letty to report future progress immediately to avoid being yelled at, while Sector suggests bringing the merchant over. A sudden clack sounds as Mireille tells Letty to stop when the girl expresses her gratitude for the help. A sudden fwish and floosh sound while a blushing Mireille turns away, leading Letty to reflect on her hot and cold personality.
The scene shifts to a top-down view of the group gathering around the table in the sitting room.
A sudden swoosh and rhythmic ka-clink sounding while magic is channeled over the bowl once more.
A sudden fizzle sounds as the moisture is pulled from the food, leaving it completely dry.
A rhythmic glub-glub sounds while Letty rehydrates the stew as the blonde man and gray-haired man watch intently. Letty offers a bright smile while explaining how the freeze-dried food returns to its original state when water is added. Letty stands by the table and notes that the current version is just a prototype that requires further research. Letty looks up with an expectant expression while asking Sector for his thoughts on her creation. A sudden reach sounds while Sector extends his hand toward the white-haired girl. A sudden fwop sounds while a joyous Sector pulls Letty into a hug to celebrate her achievement. Sector enthusiastically praises Letty's unique ingenuity, while the gray-haired man in the background watches with a sudden grit sounding. Sector's expression becomes terrifyingly intense as he demands a promise that the technique will remain strictly confidential. Sector explains that this discovery is as significant as the sugar, while Letty agrees to keep it a secret. Sector warns Letty that showing off the technique could be dangerous for everyone involved, and she acknowledges his point. Sector decides to keep the process internal to the domain for now, though he admits it feels like a bit of a waste. Sector notes that many measures must be established regarding the technology before taking any further steps.
A sudden yeah sounds as Sector cheers for the discovery and vows to find a way to use it effectively.
A sudden glance sounds while Sector looks back at the bowl of rehydrated stew sitting on the table. A sudden sit sounds while a nervous Sector asks if he can try a taste of the food. A sudden nod sounds as the gray-haired man also asks for permission to try the meal.
A sudden fwupt sounds while Mireille joins the others, claiming they must check if the food is edible.
Letty allows them to try it while privately wondering why they have such high expectations for the ordinary taste.
Sector takes a careful bite of the stew using a small wooden spoon. The gray-haired man samples the prototype meal while maintaining a neutral expression. Mireille takes a bite of the stew to judge the results of their magical experiment. Letty watches the group intently while waiting for their honest reactions to the taste. Sector notes that the taste is just normal, while the gray-haired man panics and insists it's good, prompting Mireille to describe it as average, and Letty to tell her father he doesn't need to praise her. Letty holds up a finger while reiterating that the true value of the food lies in its practical merits. Sector crosses his arms while observing that the process doesn't actually make the food more delicious. A sudden stand sounds while the gray-haired man rises from his seat to address Letty. A sudden lift sounds as he reaches out to pick up his daughter.
The gray-haired man gives Letty a happy hug and cheers about being able to eat her cooking all year round.
Sector watches the gray-haired man dote on Letty and notes that he is getting carried away again. A rhythmic ba-dump sounds while Letty admits she always gets nervous when Lord Carlo behaves so affectionately. The white-haired girl reflects on how her heart races and her face feels hot whenever Lord Carlo is near her. Letty remains flustered by the physical proximity, noting that she used to be able to handle being carried by him.
She stares at the gray-haired man's face in silent confusion, desperately wondering why her reaction to him has changed.
A sudden press sounds while Lord Carlo notices her blushing face and asks if she has a fever. A sudden lean sounds while Lord Carlo moves closer to check on her. A sudden thwop sounds while the gray-haired man notes she is quite warm and insists on getting a doctor immediately. Several days pass while Letty lies face down on her bed in silent reflection. A sudden roll sounds while Letty turns over and sighs about her inability to get used to Lord Carlo's total lack of personal space. Rhythmic shy sounds while Letty recalls a montage of memories showing how Lord Carlo constantly dotes on her and stays far too close. A sudden arg and thwump sound while a kicking Letty declares she might pass out from the sheer agony of those embarrassing memories. A sudden kerchak sounds while Letty returns to the kitchen and feels she is finally mastering the freeze-drying process. A rhythmic clack sounds while Sector, the blonde man, enters the kitchen and praises her hard work. A sudden messy sound is noted while Sector reminds Letty to keep the project confidential since the information is still highly sensitive. A sudden slip, whoa, and thwop sound while Letty accidentally drops a glass bottle only for it to be caught by a pair of hands. Sector catches the bottle and breathes a sigh of relief while Letty stares with her hands held out in surprise. A sudden hear sounds as Sector hands the bottle back and asks if she is okay, prompting Letty to thank him.
A sudden sounds as Letty reflects on how dangerous and heavy the glass storage bottles of this world are before Sector explains he came to fetch her.
A sudden gesture sounds as Sector smiles and tells the girl to follow him so she can see what he has planned. The blonde man leads Letty, Lord Carlo, and Murray into a lush forest area. Letty is amazed by the size of the beautiful clearing they have discovered in the woods. Letty looks up excitedly and asks Sector if he is planning to use this specific location for his next project. A sudden smile sounds while Sector confirms her suspicions with a confident grin. Letty recalls a past conversation where she was told they could use the plains for fields as long as they didn't touch the woods. A rhythmic rustle sounds while Sector mentions that many things have happened recently, specifically the invasion of the origami. Sector happily announces that they can finally begin growing the sugar beets necessary to produce sugar within the domain. Letty beams with joy and gives a cheerful confirmation to Sector's plan. Letty begins to address Sector when she is interrupted by the presence of her father. Lord Carlo stares at the blonde man with a dark, intense gaze and demands to know what Sector is planning. Lord Carlo asks if Sector is actually trying to force fragile Letty to help him with difficult manual labor in the fields. Murray declares that Lord Carlo is being overprotective, while a flustered Sector wonders what he would do if the girl actually got hurt. A sudden sigh sounds while Sector realizes that Lord Carlo only tagged along to protect his daughter. A sudden gulp and hey sound while Sector defends himself, explaining he only wanted Letty there to teach him how to cultivate the beets. A rhythmic rustle sounds while Letty sheepishly admits she has never actually done any farming work herself, even in her previous world. A close-up shows a determined eye, as a voice declares that they will do the work instead. A group of small, winged spirits suddenly appears in a bright glow of light. Letty is speechless as she stares at the floating spirit directly in front of her. Sector and Lord Carlo both stare in wide-eyed, comical shock at the sudden appearance of the spirits. Murray is frozen in complete disbelief by the sight of the magical beings. A loud "what?" cries out through the clearing as the group reacts to the surprise. Letty is visibly shaken by the encounter and admits the sudden appearance gave her quite a shock. Letty realizes that the glowing balls of light she previously saw in the spirit woods can actually manifest as sentient, human-shaped spirits. A sudden sounds while Letty recalls seeing such beings in the game, but notes this is her first time seeing them in person. A sudden flutter sounds as a spirit floats close and asks if their appearance is really that shocking to the group. The spirit reminds Letty that they previously helped the group when they were being swallowed up by the origami. Letty is stunned to learn that the spirits were watching from afar when she woke up, a detail she completely failed to notice. A sudden lean sounds while the spirit moves closer to Letty and addresses her as their savior. The spirit smiles brightly and promises Letty that they will definitely find a way to return the favor for her help. A sudden tap sounds while the small spirit steps onto the palm of Letty's outstretched hand. The small silver-haired spirit standing on Letty's hand clarifies that their appearance is only one part of the message they have brought. A red-haired spirit with translucent wings adds that the spirit kings have also expressed their support for the girl. A yellow-haired spirit explains that the spirit kings were curious why the white-haired girl had not yet requested their assistance. A green-haired spirit floating nearby mentions that the king's persistent questioning is becoming a hassle and asks if they can help.
A sudden, rhythmic flap-flap sounding while the yellow spirit asks Letty if she has truly met the spirit kings before.
A vision of Haluna, the spirit king of light, appears as a tall, blonde woman with a serene and welcoming smile. The spirit king of restoration, Serena, is shown as a gentle pink-haired woman with a friendly wave. Silver, the spirit king of the wind, is depicted as a composed man with short green hair and a serious expression. The red-haired spirit king of fire, Rushtink, is presented as a stoic and focused man with sharp, pointed ears. Nina, the spirit king of earth, is seen as a brown-haired woman looking back over her shoulder with a mysterious gaze. Murray and the gray-haired man observe the scene, noting that there are 5 distinct spirit kings involved in the matter. Letty becomes overwhelmed by the sudden influx of spirits and their constant chatter, prompting her to ask Sector for guidance. A rhythmic throb sounding while a stressed Sector admits that spirit matters are out of his jurisdiction and tells her to fetch Latius. A rhythmic blab sounding while Letty finds Latius, the dark-haired man, busy among the books in the temple library. Letty leads the surprised Latius back to the forest clearing, announcing to the group that the high priest has arrived. A sudden murmur of a crowd sounding as the entire group gathers in the forest clearing, surrounded by glowing spirit lights. A sudden pat sounding while a grinning Sector encourages the confused Latius to step forward and help the spirits. A sudden rhythmic excited sounding while the small silver-haired and yellow-haired spirits cheer in anticipation of the upcoming task. Latius suggests they divide the labor and allow the spirits to help cultivate the sugar beets and handle the sugar production. A sudden nod sounding while Sector agrees that the massive workload would be far too much for just their group to handle. The small spirits express their joy and enthusiasm at finally having the opportunity to repay their debt of kindness to the girl. A sudden cheer and whip sounding while the group prepares to work, though Sector questions if Latius is truly certain about the plan. Latius explains that spirits can be stubborn if their help is refused, while Letty agrees that giving them work is the best approach. A sudden, rhythmic thud sounding as dozens of spirits vigorously begin clearing the land and preparing the new fields. The yellow-haired spirit mentions that they are using the surrounding trees as cover to remain hidden from the sight of other humans. Letty understands that the spirits are careful because their public appearance would cause a major disturbance among the common people. A sudden flutter sounding as Letty thanks the spirits for being so considerate, though the spirit insists that helping each other is better. The small yellow-haired spirit smiles brightly and reassures the white-haired girl that she should simply leave everything to them. Sudden phew and sigh sounds occur as the men relax, while Murray watches the scene with a thoughtful expression. The group observes the spirits' incredible progress, and Sector warns that this place might be mistaken for holy ground if word gets out. Letty gazes at the bustling activity and silently acknowledges the incredible power and dedication the spirits are showing. A group of light spirits uses their magic to help the newly planted sugar beets sprout quickly from the soil. Other spirits are shown tirelessly handling the harvest and stirring a large pot to refine the raw materials into sugar. Sector is impressed by the speed of production, but Latius cautions that they should not rely entirely on the spirits' help. Latius explains that spirits are fundamentally fickle and might lose interest and return home within a week. A sudden thwop sounding while a stunned Sector learns that the spirits' productivity depends entirely on their current mood. Lord Carlo notes that sugar has a long shelf life, making it easy to store whatever amount the spirits manage to produce. A sudden turn sounding as Lord Carlo asks Sector where they should plan to store the large quantity of finished sugar. Latius excuses himself to return to his duties while the gray-haired man decides to use the second warehouse for storage. Letty reflects on how her father smoothly handles logistical matters just as Murray calls out for her help. The white-haired girl turns around with a curious expression to see what the brown-haired woman needs. A rhythmic shake sounding while a struggling Marie, carrying a huge mountain of glass jars, asks for assistance. Murray explains that the spirits are working so fast that the sugar jars are piling up faster than she can sort them. A sudden oof sounding while Letty carefully takes several of the heavy glass bottles filled with refined sugar. A rhythmic clink sounding as Murray warns Letty to watch her step on the uneven forest floor. As she walks, Letty begins to contemplate finding a more efficient way to store and preserve food within the domain.
A sudden thwop and kaya sounding while Letty loses her balance and the heavy glass bottles begin to slip from her grasp.
Letty stumbles forward toward the ground as a panicked Marie cries out in alarm for the girl. A sudden gasp sounding as Letty realizes she is about to fall, while an urgent voice tells her to duck. A sudden thwop sounding as a hand reaches out with incredible speed to intercept the falling jars and save the girl. A sudden, sharp grab sounding. Letty's falling bottles are intercepted midair by a protective hand. A rhythmic ka-clink and swooze sounding. Lord Carlo successfully catches the glass bottles and the falling girl. A sudden woo sounding as the gray-haired man expresses relief after his narrow save. Lord Carlo looks down with a concerned expression and asks Letty if she is all right. A sudden ba-dump sounding as a blushing Letty is overwhelmed by the gray-haired man's handsome face. A sudden swoosh sounding while Lord Carlo scolds Letty for her carelessness and takes the bottles from her. A sudden lean and stare sounding while Lord Carlo checks the white-haired girl for any injuries. A sudden pluck sounding as Letty takes a jar back from Murray, declaring her mind is firmly made up. A sudden yell sounding as Letty announces she will find a better way to store their food.
A title card announces the beginning of Chapter 38.
Letty repeats her goal to the group, emphasizing her intent to find a superior food storage method.
Lord Carlo and Murray are confused by Letty's sudden proclamation and ask her what she means.
The scene shifts as Letty promises to explain everything once the group returns to the mansion. The group gathers in the drawing room. Letty explains that the glass bottles used for food storage are heavy, unwieldy, and dangerous.
A sudden flop, slip, and kya sounding while Letty recalls how she almost broke the jars twice today.
Letty argues that a lighter alternative would be far more convenient for their needs.
Letty points a finger and confidently announces her plan to manufacture plastic bags.
The group is baffled by the word as Letty explains that plastic bags existed in her original world.
Letty visualizes how transparent plastic bags are used to store salt, sugar, and meat back in Japan.
Letty asks Lord Carlo if there are any materials in this world that could be used for plastic bags.
A sudden turn sounding while Sector mentions a raw material that might be useful for her project.
Sector describes the Mater spider, a dungeon monster that produces a unique type of silk. Letty suddenly recalls that this world features dangerous dungeons and powerful monsters.
A vision shows how protagonists explore dungeons for gems and weapons in role-playing games.
Heroes battle various monsters to clear missions as a key element of the game experience.
The narration notes that deeper levels of the dungeon harbor increasingly strong and fearsome monsters. A sudden sound sounding while Letty realizes she hadn't considered using materials harvested from monsters. A sudden thumbs up sounding while a cheerful Sector offers to go and collect the material for her.
Letty is thrilled at the prospect and hopes this will lead to successful plastic bag production.
Scene shifts a few minutes later. A large chunk of white's up.
The group gathers around the silp.
A sudden stunned sounding while Letty gazes at the strange large chunk of material. A sudden pickup sounding while Sector explains the non-sticky silk is harvested from the spider's captures.
Letty observes the silk isn't porous. Letty asks Sector how the silk material is typically utilized. Sector explains that the silk cushions exported glass jars within their wooden crates. Letty realizes the silk serves the same purpose as cushioning material from her original world. Letty suggests stretching the material into thinner sheets after softening it over a fire.
Murray confirms the material can be softened with heat, much to Letty's excitement.
A sudden thwop sounding as Letty grabs Murray's hand with a determined expression.
A sudden turn sounding as Letty leads Murray away to begin their new experiments.
A sudden pat sounding as Sector reminds the protective Lord Carlo that he still has work to do.
A sudden glint sounding while Lord Carlo claims his work is finished, prompting Sector's disbelief.
The group moves to the kitchen. Lord Carlo prepares a pot while Letty thanks him for helping with her experiment. Lord Carlo asks Murray if she is truly needed, causing Letty to react in surprise. Murray and Letty both insist the brown-haired woman stays, and Murray eventually agrees to remain.
A sudden ba-dump sounding while Letty admits to herself that she gets nervous when alone with her father.
The gray-haired man suggests putting the material into the heated pot, and Letty agrees.
A sudden reach sounding as hands carefully place the white silk chunk into the pot.
The material rests inside the pot while steam begins to rise from the heat.
A sudden swish sounding while the material is stirred within the heated vessel.
The white-haired girl asks the brown-haired woman to prepare a tray for the next step. The gray-haired man eagerly asks his daughter what his next task should be.
Letty asks her father to hold the pot while waiting for the tray, and he correctly interprets her plan to pour the contents.
the white-haired girl is amused by her father's intense enthusiasm as he cheers in anticipation.
Murray returns with the tray, and the girl thanks her as they prepare to work.
The gray-haired man announces he is pouring the material while Letty confirms her readiness.
Murray warns the gray-haired man to be careful, but he confidently reassures her that everything will be fine. A sudden splash sounding. The gray-haired man accidentally spills the liquid material onto the counter.
Murray notes the failure, while a regretful Lord Carlo apologizes for his mistake and Letty reassures him.
A sudden spread sounding as they use a spoon to flatten the material into a sheet and wait for it to solidify. A sudden flap sounding while several hours pass as the experiment continues.
Letty is thrilled with the successful sheet, and a surprised Lord Carlo asks if this is the plastic she intended to make.
A sudden clack sounding while the group observes the thin, transparent nature of the new material. The brown-haired woman adjusts her glasses and asks Letty how she intends to use the sheet. The white-haired girl and her father are momentarily stunned as they consider their next move.
Letty realizes she still needs to figure out how to transform the flat sheet into a functional bag. Lord Carlo expresses his gratitude for Murray's constant support and sharp observations.
The gray-haired man suggests melting the material again, surprising Letty with his sudden idea. Lord Carlo explains his plan to melt the silk and let it solidify in a pot to carve out a bag shape.
Letty is skeptical and asks if the material will really slip out of the pot cleanly.
A sudden lift sounding while the gray-haired man reassures his daughter and picks up the pot. A sudden bam sounding as the pot is slammed down onto the table while the man tries to explain himself. A sudden spill sounding. The group watches in dismay as the liquid material splashes out of the pot. Murray looks on with gloom while Letty is left speechless by the messy result. A sudden tremble sounding as a blushing and ashamed Lord Carlo apologizes for his repeated mistakes.
Letty reassures her father by pointing out that they have plenty of raw material provided by Sector.
A sudden squeeze and thwop sounding while the white-haired girl hugs her emotional and sniffling father. The brown-haired woman suggests that the exhausted man should take a seat and rest. A sudden clack sounding. Lord Carlo sits gloomily while Murray and Letty prepare to restart the process. A sudden spread sounding as Letty uses a spoon to examine the sheet and considers a different approach. Letty admits that her father's idea wasn't entirely wrong, surprising the other two with her realization. A sudden shove and jolt sounding while Letty excitedly shows a tool to the confused brown-haired woman.
The white-haired girl asks Murray to gently heat a spoon handle, causing the woman to worry about potential burns.
Muriel agrees to help but asks for clarification on what Letty plans to do with the heated spoon.
Letty confidently explains her plan to use the heated handle as a sealer to form the bag. A sudden sizzle sounding. Letty visualizes using a heat sealer to close bags, just like back in Japan.
Maria apologizes for being confused by the foreign vocabulary Letty just used. Letty realizes she accidentally used words from her original world and worries about her natural slip-up.
A sudden sizzle sounding while Letty rephrases her explanation, carefully avoiding any mentions of her past life.
Mariah understands the concept of welding the ends together and eagerly agrees to try the new method.
A sudden clack sounding as someone approaches the busy group in the kitchen.
The gray-haired man asks if he can help, having understood the goal of the new experiment.
A sudden shine sounding while Letty happily accepts her father's offer to assist.
Murray agrees to let the man help, suggesting he take charge of the hot spoon as an adult.
Letty is glad to see her father looks happy again while he confidently takes on the important task.
Letty explains how they will hold the corners together while Murray softens the material with heat.
The gray-haired man warns the group to be careful with the heat, as the white-haired girl acknowledges his advice.
The brown-haired woman observes the pair working together and notes how much they resemble a father and daughter. The group continues their careful work at the wooden counter. The white-haired girl reacts in shock as the gray-haired man accidentally splashes liquid while they handle the new material. A sudden bam sounding as they successfully produce a thin, transparent sheet. The white-haired girl is impressed by the material's durability compared to glass, despite some uneven edges from the sealing. The brown-haired woman considers the need for a heat source to eventually seal the bag openings shut. The white-haired girl realizes they can produce smaller versions of the bags, much to the group's satisfaction.
The brown-haired woman visualizes a process of cutting the solidified material into segments and sealing them into small individual pouches. The white-haired girl praises her companion's insight, while the gray-haired man agrees that smaller bags would be highly versatile.
Several oomph soundings followed by a sudden gasp sounding while the white-haired girl's excitement turns into a sudden realization about a specific person in need.
The white-haired girl points toward the new invention and declares that it could be the solution for a certain individual's plight.
A title card announces the beginning of Chapter 40.
Narration explains that a new dungeon is destined to be discovered within the country in 4 years.
A sudden crunch sounding as the foot of an adventurer steps onto the path leading toward the future discovery. A sudden flap sounding as the hem of a dark cloak waves in the wind.
The adventurer is revealed as the first prince and heir to the throne, Leonard Faras Remdesia. It is noted that Leonard is the biological brother of the second prince, who had plotted against the white-haired girl.
Leonard is described as having a compassionate personality, shown as he kindly encourages one of his hard-working subordinates.
Leonard personally led his men into the dungeons, but eventually became hopelessly trapped within one of them.
The battered prince stands alone in the dark as the narration reveals that he ultimately starved to death.
Rescue troops were already on their way, but he could not hold out long enough for them to arrive.
If he had been able to survive for just a few more days, his life might have been saved. The morning air is filled with several chirp soundings as the white-haired girl reflects on this tragic history.
The white-haired girl realizes that her new storage bags and freeze-dried food could provide the necessary sustenance for a trapped explorer.
The blonde-haired man considers how these inventions might help someone survive those critical extra days.
The brown-haired woman brings tea and asks the blonde-haired man if he has come to a realization. The blonde-haired man points out that having Leonard on the throne would be very beneficial for the white-haired girl's future safety.
The white-haired girl stares at her own reflection in her tea and weighs the potential benefits against the risks involved. The girl looks shocked and worried.
The blonde-haired man reminds the gray-haired man that the first prince is related to the wicked second prince.
The white-haired girl is overwhelmed by worry regarding potential hidden connections. A vision of a sinister black-haired woman appears as the white-haired girl suspects a plot involving the first prince. A sudden stand sounding while the white-haired girl abruptly rises from her chair. The gray-haired man calls out to his daughter, sensing her sudden distress.
The white-haired girl wonders if the terrifying memories resurfacing in her mind belong to the original owner of her body.
A sudden badump sounding while the white-haired girl is paralyzed by a memory of the second prince's wicked grin.
The white-haired girl shouts her refusal in a panic, startling everyone at the table.
A sudden stand sounding as the blonde-haired man rises to check on the white-haired girl's well-being.
The gray-haired man comforts his daughter and promises to protect her from whatever she fears.
A sudden raise sounding as the brown-haired woman lifts a hand to speak.
The brown-haired woman asks if the group is officially abandoning the plan to save the first prince.
The white-haired girl expresses her conflicting feelings about using her inventions for such a risky purpose.
The gray-haired man and the blonde-haired man watch the girl in thoughtful silence.
A sudden stand sounding while the blonde-haired man tells the girl she shouldn't feel forced to do anything. Several clack soundings while the blonde-haired man walks away, listing all the incredible things the girl has already achieved. A sudden ruffle sounding as the blonde-haired man affectionately pets the girl and credits her for the positive changes in the domain.
The blonde-haired man suggests that she take her time to consider the situation since there is no immediate emergency.
The blonde-haired man addresses the group as the white-haired girl begins to calm down. A sudden grab sounding. The gray-haired man playfully squishes his daughter's cheeks, earning a muffled protest.
Sector rubs the white-haired girl's cheeks and promises he is finding ways to use her inventions, as she tells him a sudden, repetitive rub sounding to stop.
A sudden rumble sounding while the gray-haired man glowers and tells the blonde-haired man to stop touching his daughter.
The blonde-haired man smiles innocently while the white-haired girl makes a funny face. The gray-haired man complains that the blonde-haired man always gets between him and his daughter, as the other man offers a weak apology.
The white-haired girl explains she isn't being clingy on purpose and suggests her father stop smothering her, causing the gray-haired man to yell at his companion to back off.
The brown-haired woman is amazed by the girl's constant stream of inventions, while the girl thinks to herself that she wouldn't have thought of them either.
The white-haired girl explains she is simply recreating things she already knew from her previous life as a Japanese person.
The white-haired girl suggests that because this world is fictional and based on a game, it might be easier to recreate things, leaving the brown-haired woman confused.
The gray-haired man looks on in utter shock. The blonde-haired man stares in disbelief.
The gray-haired man asks what is wrong as he notices the strange atmosphere.
The gray-haired man demands that Letty explain her comment about the world being fictional.
The gray-haired man is bewildered as he repeats the girl's claim about their world being fictional.
A title card announces the start of Chapter 41. The white-haired girl panics, realizing she finally slipped up after trying so hard to keep her secret.
The white-haired girl stammers while the two men watch her, hoping she can still find a way to explain everything away.
A sudden pat sounding as a gloved hand reaches out to comfort the white-haired bro.
The brown-haired woman reassures the girl that she understands her silence was born out of consideration for them. The white-haired girl looks up at Murray with gratitude.
The brown-haired woman tells the girl that they have already been surprised so much that they can handle whatever the truth may be.
The gray-haired man and the blonde-haired man agree, asking the girl to finally share the details so they can stop worrying.
The blonde-haired man is left speechless as the conversation continues. The blonde-haired man shouts in disbelief, asking if they are really just characters in a written story.
The brown-haired woman scolds the loud merchant for his outburst after the girl just finished her explanation.
The blonde-haired man complains about being called a wicked merchant, while the gray-haired man sinks into deep thought. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding while the blonde-haired man asks how they can stay so calm, but the brown-haired woman insists there's no point in making a scene. The white-haired girl looks up at the tall man next to her.
The white-haired girl realizes that their shocked reactions are perfectly natural given the news.
The white-haired girl looks down and offers a sincere apology to the group. A sudden clench sounding as the white-haired girl grips her dress, crying that she never intended to hurt anyone with the truth. A sudden lift sounding while the gray-haired man scoops his daughter up into his arms. A sudden tap and badump sounding as the man holds his daughter close and reassures her that they know she is a kind person.
The gray-haired man tells his daughter that everyone understands her heart.
The brown-haired woman and the blonde-haired man agree that speaking the truth hasn't changed their lives or their feelings. The brown-haired woman wonders if the girl's memories were returned to her as a reaction to the Spirit King.
The white-haired girl notes that there are times when she struggles to tell the difference between this world and her previous one. The brown-haired woman warns the girl to be more careful about what she says in front of others as the blonde-haired man listens in.
Several scritch soundings while a hand writes a letter at a desk as night falls over the castle. A sudden step sounding as a subordinate takes his leave from the first prince.
The black-haired man, the first Prince Leonard, is shown holding a quill at his desk.
A sudden clatter sounding while the prince decides it is time to go to bed. A sudden throb sounding as the black-haired prince is struck by a painful vision.
A collage shows the prince's future fate of being trapped and starving within a dungeon.
The black-haired prince gasps, wondering what he just saw in his mind.
A sudden pew sounding as the prince catches his breath after the intense vision.
The black-haired prince decides that the vision he just had is something he must investigate.
The brown-haired woman's previous warning about the blurred lines between worlds is echoed once more. A sudden sigh sounding while the white-haired girl reflects on her situations.
The white-haired girl worries that she is losing her sense of what memories belong to her past life versus her current one.
A sudden clench sounding as the white-haired girl balls her hand into a fist in the moonlight.
Letty's morning routine begins with a sudden, rapid slap-slap sounding as she prepares herself for the day.
She feels a sudden sting sounding on her cheeks while vowing to be more careful and strong from now on.
The white-haired girl is startled and asks the brown-haired woman what is the matter. The brown-haired woman stands in the hallway and attempts to bring up their previous discussion.
Her attention is caught by a sudden, sharp gasp sounding from the woman standing before her.
The moment is softened by a sudden, gentle ruffle sounding as the brown-haired woman affectionately messes with the girl's hair. The white-haired girl is shocked by the sudden display of affection from Murray. The brown-haired woman explains that while the girl may have confused memories, she shouldn't let them make her feel down. The brown-haired woman smiles warmly and claims that the girl's cheerfulness is her only good feature. The white-haired girl is stunned into silence by the rare sight of Marie smiling. The gray-haired man objects to the woman's remark while she stands her ground and repeats her claim. The white-haired girl laughs at the playful bickering of her companions. The girl reflects on how many events have passed and feels grateful to have the people of Sentencia by her side. A title card announces the beginning of Chapter 42. White butterflies flutter through a vibrant field of pink and white flowers under a clear blue sky. A grand white manor with blue roofs stands tall behind a set of intricate iron gates.
Sunlight streams into a quiet, elegantly furnished room filled with tall bookshelves and comfortable pink chairs.
The silence is broken by a sudden, firm knock-knock sounding on the heavy wooden door as a voice requests entry. The door opens with a sudden clink, sounding as an older maid enters pushing a tray filled with tea and porcelain cups.
The morning light is accompanied by a sudden rustle and clatter sounding as the maid informs the girl that it is time to wake up.
The girl responds sleepily while the room fills with the movement of her sitting up in her bed. The maid asks if the girl will handle her own dressing as usual, and the girl agrees but asks for help with her messy hair.
The maid responds with a sudden crisp flop sounding while tossing a clean white dress onto the bed. The dressing process continues with a sudden, smooth slide sounding as a white sleeve is pulled up the girl's arm.
The gown is finished with a sudden, firm tighten sounding as a blue ribbon is secured at the girl's waist.
The girl's long white hair is styled with a sudden, rhythmic slide sounding as it is woven into an expert braid.
The girl steps off her stool with a sudden rustle and clack sounding while the maid marvels at how much she has grown.
The white-haired girl is revealed with a new, shorter hairstyle and a more mature expression. The girl smiles and notes that she has already reached 10 years of age.
The room fills with a sudden, steady clack-clack sounding while the maid credits the girl for the region's prosperity.
The white-haired girl smiles brightly and insists that everyone's help was the true reason for their success.
The girl heads toward the door to find some breakfast while the maid offers a respectful bow.
She moves through the hallway with a sudden, rhythmic clack-clack sounding as she reflects on their new sugar and salt production. An aerial view shows the girl's grand manor, which has been completely renovated and improved. The girl explains that she had no choice but to spend the money since the building was starting to fall apart. The town's infrastructure has been significantly upgraded, leaving it unrecognizable compared to 4 years ago. The dining room fills with a sudden step sounding while the servants begin clearing the table after the girl's meal.
The girl's attention is drawn to the door by a sudden handle turning.
Mireille enters the room with a sudden, crisp clack-clack-clack sounding and asks the girl if she has finished her breakfast.
The white-haired girl turns around and happily greets her tutor.
The breakfast table is cleared with a sudden, rhythmic rattle-rattle sounding while the tutor explains she arrived early for their classes.
Mireille suggests heading to the courtyard for the day's lessons while the girl wonders what they will be doing.
The gray-haired man shouts that he cannot accept the person being proposed as the girl's future groom. Sector explains that a new marriage proposal has arrived from a noble family in a southern region. A black-haired man holding a staff politely asks to leave, claiming he only stopped by for a minor matter. The group discusses how Sentencia has become a wealthy and desirable region in recent years. The father's frustration is highlighted by a sudden, sharp grit sounding as he considers the influx of suitors. The father vents his anger with a sudden, heavy scrunch sounding while rejecting a proposal from a man older than himself.
The scene is interrupted by a sudden, firm grab sounding as Sector attempts to restrain the overprotective father. The chaotic morning ends with a sudden, weary sigh sounding while Mireille and the high priest watch the father's outburst.
The blonde-haired man suggests it is good that the girl is popular as she will find an heir quickly, but the gray-haired man firmly objects, noting she is only 10 and he will not accept a suitor older than himself. A title card announces the 43rd chapter of the story.
The white-haired girl and her companions watch the overprotective father from the garden. The white-haired girl observes her father and reflects on how his protective nature remains unchanged.
The brown-haired woman notes that the suitor is clearly more interested in the domain than the girl herself, while the blonde-haired man agrees.
The gray-haired man shouts his refusal to allow his daughter to marry the proposed suitor.
A series of mutters sound while the father insists that any future husband for his daughter must be a virtuous man.
The brown-haired woman suggests beginning the day's lessons as the father continues to ramble about finding a protector for his daughter. The white-haired girl looks back at the group and thinks about how her father is always considering her well-being. The brown-haired woman notices the girl's expression and asks why she is smiling.
The white-haired girl beams with a bright smile and claims there is no particular reason. A sudden stretch and yawning sounding while the white-haired girl prepares for bed after a long day. A sudden rhythmic kick sounding as the girl ponders the talk of marriage, comparing her current age to her memories of her previous life. A sudden roll sounding while the white-haired girl recalls that in the original timeline, the region was still heavily in debt at this age.
A flashback shows the gray-haired man with his second wife as they drive the white-haired girl away from her home.
The girl's memories show her meeting Mariette and the second prince in the original story.
A dark vision shows the white-haired girl standing before a guillotine, having been set up and sentenced to death. The white-haired girl rests in bed and feels relieved that she may have avoided the path leading to her demise. She reflects on the school of sorcery she was meant to attend and confirms her decision not to go.
The girl recalls her current training, where Mireille teaches her the intricacies of magic.
She notes that Ladius has also been teaching her how to construct complex magic tools.
The girl's training includes basic swordsmanship practice with her father in the courtyard. The white-haired girl smiles, confident that she is learning everything she needs without attending the academy. A sudden roll sounding as the girl hugs her pillow, her gamer instincts making her curious about how much more she could improve at a school.
A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as a realization hits the white-haired girl in the middle of the night. A sudden kerchok sounding while the girl switches off her lamp and tells herself to stop worrying since everything is going well. A sudden blink and bam sounding while she recalls a dangerous event involving a massive purple creature.
The girl worries that Mariette may already view her as a significant obstacle to her plans.
A sudden sit-up sounding as the white-haired girl realizes that the danger is still present. She suspects that Mariette is lying in wait and likely has a hidden scheme prepared. The white-haired girl resolves to deal with Mariette, whom she identifies as the true villainess. She remains tense, worried that she cannot be entirely sure if she has escaped her original fate. The black-haired prince looks on while the narrative suggests that everything is beginning to move.
A hooded blonde man smiles in the shadows and declares that the next phase starts now.
A title card announces the start of Chapter 44. A sudden cree and shunk sounding as sharp ice crystals materialize in the air.
A sudden zhik-zhik sounding as the ice shards strike a row of red apples on a wooden table.
A sudden long pew sounding as the white-haired girl catches her breath after her successful magic display. A sudden brighten sounding while the girl is delighted to hear that she handled her magic perfectly. Morel confirms that the girl's progress in magic over the past 4 years has been very impressive. The tutor walks away and warns her student not to become arrogant, while the girl playfully shouts back her denial. A sudden ka-chuck sounding as Murray adjusts her glasses, while the girl mutters about her tutor's constant criticism. A sudden flash sounding as the girl uses more magic, reflecting on how her original character was always meant to be talented.
The white-haired girl imagines her future self as a powerful and legendary sorceress.
Her daydream is interrupted by her tutor's voice calling out to her. A sudden startled wah sounding as the girl finds her tutor's face inches away from her own.
Morel scolds the girl for getting distracted by her own thoughts during their training session.
A sudden tremble sounding as the white-haired girl praises her tutor, catching the woman off guard. A sudden flush sounding as the tutor's face turns bright red while she stammers that the compliment was unnecessary. The tutor's face flushes with a sudden, warm glow while she notes that the girl is much colder than she expected. The brown-haired woman suddenly pauses with a silent, tense focus as she senses a change in the atmosphere. Murray alerts the girl to a sudden, suspicious commotion sounding from the direction of the manor's gate. The tutor instructs the white-haired girl to remain where she is while she investigates the source of the disturbance. The girl responds with a quiet, worried acknowledgement as her teacher departs. The courtyard is filled with a sudden, powerful whoosh sounding as a gust of wind swirls around the startled girl. The air vibrates with a sudden, low shoo sounding, while a mysterious figure in black appears before the confused girl. A blonde-haired man reveals himself and addresses the girl by her nickname. The white-haired girl is overcome with a sudden, sharp dread while she tries to identify the stranger. She asks the man for his identity while he stands tall and calm in the empty space. The girl panics as she realizes she is trapped in a magical void where no sound escapes, while the man offers a polite apology. The blonde-haired man admits he neglected to introduce himself, while the girl remains intensely on guard. The man offers a respectful bow and identifies himself as Leonard Faras Ramdegia, the first prince of the realm. The prince addresses her by her full name, leaving the girl visibly shaken and terrified. The girl's mind races with a sudden, frantic realization while she wonders if this man is truly the heir to the throne. She accuses him of being an imposter, claiming he looks nothing like the prince she remembers. The blonde-haired man explains he is using a magical disguise to avoid attracting attention while traveling. The girl resolves to keep the prince talking with a sudden, desperate hope that her tutor will arrive to rescue her. The man reveals that his spatial magic is far too powerful for her teacher to break through. The prince's voice drops with a sudden, chilling certainty while he informs the girl that escape is impossible. The girl wonders what the prince's true intentions are while he watches her with a calm expression. She is struck by a sudden, terrifying gasp sounding while she considers if the prince is allied with her rivals from the past. A title card announces the 45th chapter of the story. The girl attempts to break the barrier with her own magic, desperately insisting that she must find a way out. Her efforts are met with a sudden, disappointing fade, sounding as her magic circle dissolves into nothingness. The girl is stunned by the failure of her spell, while the prince notes the impossibility of her task. The blonde-haired man explains that only the caster can use magic within this restricted space, trapping her completely. The silence is broken by a sudden, steady clack, sounding as the man approaches to ask her a question. The girl screams her refusal and attempts to flee from the approaching stranger. She continues to run with a sudden, frantic panting sounding, but the prince mocks her efforts to distance herself. The girl cries out for her father's help just as the man's hand reaches toward her. The magical barrier shatters with a sudden, explosive crash sounding. The dark void collapses as the girl continues her desperate flight toward the light. The girl and the prince are both caught in a sudden mutual shock while the barrier falls away.
The gray-haired man appears with a sword of ice and urgently checks on his daughter's well-being.
The girl lunges into her father's arms with a sudden, emotional squeeze sounding while he apologizes for his delay.
The father lets out a sudden, relieved pew sounding while he holds his daughter close to ensure her safety. The blonde-haired man takes a sudden, measured step while expressing his surprise at the intrusion. The prince notes that he did not expect anyone to be capable of shattering his magical space with ice.
The father glares at the intruder and demands an explanation, addressing him as Lord Shale.
The white-haired girl is confused by the unfamiliar name her father used to identify the stranger.
The blonde-haired man finds the situation intimidating as he stands before the angry father.
The man realizes that the father is prepared to attack him regardless of his high social status.
The girl reflects on her father's knowledge of royal magic and wonders why he used a different name.
She suspects the prince has used a transformation to assume the identity of this mysterious Lord Shale.
The girl shivers with a sudden cold dread as her father's tone becomes uncharacteristically harsh. She notices the intense and fearsome aura emanating from her father as he confronts the intruder.
The blonde-haired man stands in silent contemplation as he faces the protective father.
The man lets out a sudden, weary sigh sounding while he evaluates the situation. The prince admits he underestimated the extent of the father's devotion and his willingness to defy royalty.
The blonde-haired man holds his hands up and apologizes to the group.
He explains that he got ahead of himself while the father holds his daughter protectively.
A sudden nod sounding as he states he simply has a question for the girl.
A sudden step sounding while he moves toward the center of the courtyard.
The white-haired girl demands proof that he is truly Prince Leonard.
He acknowledges that it is difficult for her to trust him while he is in disguise.
A sudden shine sounding as his ring activates and a bright light surrounds him. A sudden thwip sounding while a magical transformation begins to alter his appearance.
A sudden shine sounding as his blonde hair shifts into a dark reddish-brown color.
A sudden shump sounding while the dark-haired prince is fully revealed to the girl.
The white-haired girl is left breathless by the sudden change in his appearance.
She realizes that his true form matches the first prince from her past memories. She agrees to trust him for the time being, though the prince notes her father's lingering doubt.
The gray-haired father glares at the visitor with intense and focused suspicion. A sudden step sounding as the father moves to block the prince from his daughter.
The dark-haired prince understands the father's protective nature and his caution.
A sudden nod sounding as the girl asks what he wants to inquire about. A sudden rustle sounding as a strong wind blows through the courtyard trees. The prince admits that he has repeated his life over and over again.
A title card announces the 46th chapter of the story. He explains the nature of his loop to the shocked father and daughter. He acknowledges the possibility that they may not believe his extraordinary claim. The gray-haired father suggests moving to a more private location to continue their discussion. He offers to guide the prince to his quarters to speak in secret.
The scene shifts to the manor's grand interior with its ornate chandeliers and architecture.
They are seated in a quiet study as the prince remains in his blonde disguise.
The white-haired girl reflects on his need for a disguise while he sits before her. She asks him to provide more information about how he has been repeating his life.
A sudden clench sounding while he describes his recurring deaths during dungeon hunts.
The prince notes that his memories returned approximately 4 years ago. A dark flashback shows him in his true form, lying defeated in a dungeon. He explains that there are subtle changes in the details of each repeated life. He recalls the horrific experience of being trapped and dying of starvation.
The father and his daughter listen with a heavy and somber focus. A sudden grit sounding as the prince expresses his internal struggle and frustration. He explains his firm belief that his current actions are necessary.
The girl observes him quietly and decides that he is not lying about his past. She's surprised to find another character who is aware of the loop.
She notes his awareness of the repeating nature of their world.
He explains his desperation to change the future where his death is certain. He reveals that his search for answers led him to study their domain specifically.
The father and daughter remain focused as they process his surprising revelations. He mentions the revolutionary salt technology that has improved their local economy. The white-haired girl is stunned that he knows about her secret contributions. A sudden stand sounding as he admits he used too much force in his initial approach. A sudden bow and fwop sounding while the prince offers a sincere apology.
He admits it was immature to treat such a cute girl so harshly.
The girl admits she was surprised, but now understands the burden he carries. The dark-haired prince offers a warm and grateful smile as he thanks her.
A sudden badump sounding as the white-haired girl's heart skips a beat. The white-haired girl asks the blonde-haired man if it is safe for him to have left the capital.
The blonde-haired man explains that he has an assistant acting as his double to avoid suspicion.
The girl is impressed by the subordinate's loyalty, while the prince confirms it was a difficult arrangement.
The blonde-haired man remains silent as he listens to her response.
The white-haired girl considers the prince's leadership and wonders if he is someone she can finally trust. A sudden tug sounding as she pulls on her father's sleeve, hoping the prince can be a powerful ally.
A title card announces the 47th chapter of the story.
A sudden nod sounding while the girl listens intently to the prince.
A sudden nod sounding as the gray-haired father acknowledges the gravity of the situation.
The blonde-haired man continues his explanation as they sit in the quiet room. He asks for their patience as he begins to recount his own experiences. The blonde-haired man hesitates for a moment before addressing a startling possibility. He asks the girl if she also possesses memories of repeating her life through a loop.
The girl reflects on how she revealed her past and her efforts to change the future.
The blonde-haired man suggests that her interference with history may have triggered his own memories.
The white-haired girl agrees that there may be a direct connection between their experiences.
The prince wonders if there are others in the world who share their knowledge of the loop.
The white-haired girl admits that she is unsure if anyone else knows the truth.
The blonde-haired man insists that they must develop a new strategy to successfully change their fate.
The girl asks why he doesn't simply avoid the dangerous dungeon hunting that leads to his death. A sudden shake sounding as the prince rejects the idea of abandoning his duties.
He explains that he cannot allow his subordinates to face such danger without his leadership.
The girl notes his selflessness, observing that he cares for others despite his own painful past.
She reflects on the deep trust between the prince and his men in their former lives.
The girl recalls that the second prince was known for his cold and difficult personality. She contrasts him with the first prince, who appeared to be a kind and noble person. The blonde-haired man reveals that one detail from his previous life has always bothered him. He asks why no search and rescue party ever came for him while he was trapped. The father and daughter are shocked to learn that his royal guards failed to deploy. The prince remains in deep thought as he considers the implications of his isolation.
The gray-haired father suggests that someone may have been plotting against the prince from the shadows.
The blonde-haired man is visibly startled by the idea of an internal conspiracy.
The white-haired girl realizes they must be suspicious of everyone within the royal palace.
She warns him that someone may be actively seeking to seize his position as the heir.
The girl considers that the second prince might be more connected to these events than they realize.
The father agrees that they must remain extremely cautious as they move forward.
A sudden sound sounding as someone shifts positions during the intense conversation.
The blonde-haired man touches his ring and promises to repay them for their help. A sudden tap sounding as an unfamiliar voice comments on the interest of their discussion. A tall, gray-haired figure with long ears watches them from the edge of the room.
The white-haired girl is shocked to recognize the figure as the Spirit King.
A title card announces the 48th chapter of the story.
The tall, gray-haired man stands with his arms crossed, watching the group calmly.
The girl, father, and prince are all frozen in disbelief at his sudden appearance.
A sudden tap sounding as the girl runs toward the Spirit King to ask why he is here. The prince breaks into a cold sweat as he realizes who has just entered the room.
He shouts in shock, unable to believe that a literal king of spirits is before him.
A sudden thud sounding as the prince begins to react to the presence of the powerful entity. A sudden flam sounding while the blonde-haired man drops to his knees in a deep bow. The prince offers a formal gesture of respect to the Spirit King while the others watch in awe. The tall, gray-haired man acknowledges Prince Leonard as the first prince of Ramdesia. Prince Leonard, still in his blonde disguise, offers a sincere apology for his sudden arrival in Sentencia. The gray-haired entity asks the white-haired girl and the gray-haired man if they are finished with their conversation, to which the girl replies that they are for the time being. The powerful man expresses a desire to speak with them and promises to accept the prince as a guest as long as he does not endanger Sentencia, causing Leonard to let out a sudden, fearful shiver sounding. In a more comfortable setting, the blonde-haired prince offers his gratitude for the hospitality.
The white-haired girl asks the tall figure what specific topic he wishes to discuss.
The gray-haired man looks away as he begins to address the matter at hand. The young girl gives him a sudden, curious stare, sounding as she waits for his response.
The tall man turns his attention toward the butler, addressing him as Carlo. He states his need to speak privately with Letty and requests that Carlo keep the prince company. A sudden nod sounding while the white-haired girl realizes he is communicating with her telepathically rather than speaking aloud. She wonders if he is using this method because the prince is present, while the man invites her to converse away from the others. A sudden shine sounding as a magical aura pulses through the air. The gray-haired man explains that he has conducted his own investigation into the recent events. He reveals a high probability that the sorcerer responsible for the origami attack is currently located within the royal capital. Letty is visibly shocked to learn that the culprit hasn't been apprehended yet, though the man confirms they are still at large. He expresses an urgent desire to capture them, but explains he cannot establish contact with Crochetame, the spirit king of the capital. He identifies King Crochetame as the spirit king of time and space who protects the capital. He explains that spirits are restricted to moving freely only within their own domains, a fact that the white-haired girl acknowledges. To capture the sorcerer, he explains that he requires an operative acting as a pawn within the capital. He asks Letty to accept Prince Leonard as her ally, an idea she quickly agrees to. The tall man leans in slightly as he addresses the girl by her name. He gives her a direct instruction to step outside for a moment. The white-haired girl is left completely bewildered by his sudden request. A sudden jolt sounding as the blonde-haired prince is startled by Carlos serving him tea in the study. A sudden, weary sigh sounding while the girl protests her exclusion, asking why she cannot stay. A sudden gasp sounding as she is told her expressive nature makes her far too easy to read. The gray-haired man argues that as a child, she cannot participate in complex adult discussions. A sudden whoosh sounding while he sternly warns her not to interrupt his negotiations. A sudden step and irk sounding as the white-haired girl fumes over being treated like a child despite her internal maturity. The tall figure turns back toward Carlo to resume their serious talk. He looks at the butler with a sharp gaze and suggests they begin their negotiations. A sudden nod sounding as the gray-haired Carlo focuses on the powerful visitor. The girl complains about being left out while the prince and Carlo wait for the discussion to commence. A sudden clack sounding while a heavy boot steps onto the floor near the brow.
Carlo gently strokes his daughter's face and promises to fill her in on whatever they decide later.
The white-haired girl's mood shifts instantly as she offers a bright smile and thanks her father. She waves a quick goodbye before exiting the room. A sudden pace sounding as she walks back and forth in the hall, consumed by curiosity about the meeting. A sudden grit sounding as she expresses her deep frustration at being treated like a child against her will. A sudden thwap sounding while she leans her body against the door in a desperate attempt to eavesdrop. She realizes she cannot hear anything through the thick barrier and expresses her disappointment. Back inside, the blonde-haired prince confirms his willingness to assist with the situation. The prince asks if he may pose a question to the gray-haired man. The tall figure simply asks what is on the prince's mind. He questions why the prince holds that specific belief while Carlo stands nearby. Leonard reasons that since they believe the target is in the capital, they must possess concrete information. A sudden clink sounding while the gray-haired man lets out a soft chuckle. He offers a rare compliment, telling the prince he is surprisingly clever. He finally reveals that he does indeed know the identity of the sorcerer they are looking for. The Spirit King notes that Haluna and Serena have likely dealt with the sorcerer before. He reveals a hooded blonde man named Shardus, describing him as a man of extreme pride. The gray-haired Carlo reacts to the revelation with a look of genuine surprise. Prince Leonard touches his chin, repeating the name Shardus as he considers its significance. Letty finds the name Shardus reminiscent of a villain from a video game. Carlo decides to take matters into his own hands and investigate the mysterious man. The Spirit King asks the blonde-haired prince if he is willing to become their ally. Prince Leonard confirms his willingness, but notes that it comes with a condition. A sudden nod and glance, sounding as the Spirit King and Carlo exchange a look. Carlo asks the blonde-haired man to state his terms for their consideration. A title card announces the 49th chapter of the story. The gray-haired father looks completely flabbergasted by the prince's unexpected request. A sudden, energetic jolt sounding as Letty bursts in, shouting about her father going dungeon hunting. Carlo catches her eavesdropping, and she offers a sheepish, curious apology for her behavior. A sudden, intense peer sounding as the Spirit King looms over the young girl. A sudden, fearful shiver sounding while the King of Spirits notes she ignored his instructions. Letty attempts to apologize while Carlo and the Spirit King walk through the doorway. A loud, echoing apology rings out across the grounds of the grand estate. Carlo explains to the group that the prince will join them in exchange for assistance. Prince Leonard turns his attention to the girl and decides to change the subject. Letty puffs out her red cheeks in a sudden, visible irk sounding. A sudden, light-hearted ah sounding as the father chuckles at his daughter's expressive reaction. A sudden, forceful slam sounding as Letty strikes the table, reminding them of the risks. A sudden, desperate reach sounding as she recalls the terrifying danger of their previous dungeon entry.
Carlo pulls Letty into a warm embrace, softly reassuring her that everything will be fine.
He promises not to die as Letty sulks, stubbornly insisting that she join the mission.
The father firmly denies her request, stating that he will not allow her to join the hunt.
A sudden, weary sigh sounding while Carlo holds his daughter, trying to calm her fears.
An unrolled map highlights the extreme danger of exploring unmapped and newly discovered dungeons.
Letty remains lost in a moment of silent, concerned thought.
She asks her father what they are actually searching for during these hunts.
Carlo explains that their primary objective is to chart and secure safe routes. He describes the necessity of fighting through various monsters to clear the path.
He reveals they also hunt for valuable jewels and magic stones hidden in chests.
A dark-haired man explains that magic stones serve as vital energy sources for daily life. Carlo gestures to a lamp, noting that these stones provide essential light for everyone.
Letty realizes that dungeon hunting is a critical service, providing important resources for the country.
The father mentions he must travel to the capital and asks Letty for her thoughts. Letty is caught off guard and shocked by the news of his impending departure.
Carlo explains the need for a formal meeting with the prince while Georg and Leonard are shown.
He tells her it is merely a greeting and that he will be fine alone. He suggests she spend time in the city with Sector and Murray instead. Letty begins to protest, her face filled with hesitation and doubt. She questions if they are even allowed to leave the Spirit King's protective domain.
The Spirit King grants them temporary permission to travel until the sorcerer is caught.
A sudden, relieved "oh" sounding as Letty accepts the explanation from her father.
She feels a wave of anxiety about potentially encountering Mariette and Prince George in the capital.
Carlo looks at his daughter with a warm smile and asks if she wants to join him.
Letty breaks into a joyful grin and enthusiastically agrees to go.
The scene transitions to a quiet, empty living room furnished with elegant pink chairs.
A sudden, content humming sounding as Letty sits carefully holding a soft, white object.
Murray, the orange-haired woman with glasses, observes Letty sitting on the floor with books and suggests she is packing for the capital much too early.
The white-haired girl looks up with a smile and explains that she hasn't left the domain of Sentencia since arriving in this world. Letty expresses her excitement about visiting the various stores in the capital, while Murray looks on, confirming her point. Letty responds with an enthusiastic affirmation as the scene focuses on a shelf filled with many books. She mentions that Glenn, a 16-year-old student at the School of Sorcery, has been sending her books from the capital filled with new information. Murray comments on Glenn's conscientious nature, while Letty cheers for him in a lighthearted moment.
The young girl stops mid-thought as she suddenly realizes something important.
She tells Murray she wanted to prepare a specific item before she forgot, accompanied by a sudden, quick rustling sounding. A sudden thwop sounding while Letty holds up a small plastic bag filled with prepared food. Murray is shocked that Letty plans to take freeze-dried food to the capital and asks if she intends to give it to her father, Carlo. Letty admits she wants to give it to her father discreetly without Prince Leonard noticing his guest status.
A sudden clack sounding while Marie worries that it will be a problem if the food is discovered and they are asked to mass produce it.
A sudden bam sounding as Letty presents several bags of food and Marie realizes the girl simply wants to be praised for her work. A sudden rhythmic knock sounding while Murray and Letty continue their argument through the closed door of the room.
Murray and Letty bicker about praise and stinginess while the white-haired girl pouts at her companion.
The blonde-haired Prince Leonard appears suddenly, looking completely bewildered as he asks about the item they are holding.
Both Murray and Letty are frozen in shock. Leonard offers a sheepish apology for intruding despite knocking.
The scene shifts to a wide shot as Letty realizes the prince has already caught them with the mysterious food.
A title card marks the 50th chapter of the story.
Prince Leonard stares intensely at the bag in Letty's hand, his face showing a mix of surprise and curiosity.
Murray and Letty panic over the unexpected interruption, wondering how they can possibly play off the situation.
A sudden step and jolt sounding as the prince approaches and asks if they were the ones who created the object.
He leans in slightly and asks if he may take a closer look at the small bag. A sudden shove sounding while Letty pushes the prince back, insisting that she will explain everything to him tomorrow.
A sudden kerchok sounding as Letty bolts out of the room, slamming the door behind her while shouting that she is sleepy.
A sudden wobble sounding while the exhausted girl tells Murray to explain the situation to her father instead. Murray watches her go with a look of resignation, agreeing to handle the explanation for her. The room is shown in a quiet moment, focusing on a window as the scene transitions.
Prince Leonard holds the bag of freeze-dried food in his hand, examining it with a look of intense concentration.
Sitting together later, the prince asks if the item is actually edible. Letty explains it isn't in its current state. The white-haired girl clarifies that the food must be prepared by adding hot water first. A sudden, confused "what?" sounding as Letty recalls Sector's earlier message about Carlo being busy with the Spirit King. A sudden, repeating glub sounding as hot water is poured from a white pitcher into a bowl.
Letty assures the prince it will turn into a proper stew in just a few moments while he watches with skepticism.
Leonard remains doubtful, noting that she hasn't done anything other than add hot water to the dish. A sudden waft sounding as a delicious aroma rises from the steaming bowl of freshly prepared stew. A sudden, loud clatter sounding while Prince Leonard reacts with pure shock to the transformed dish. Letty smirks with satisfaction at his reaction as Leonard declares the achievement to be stupendous. A sudden lean, jolt, and grab sounding as the prince eagerly asks to taste it, and Letty gives him permission. The blonde-haired man takes a small spoonful of the stew, bringing it to his mouth with anticipation. A sudden, visible brighten sounding as the prince's eyes light up, clearly impressed by the taste of the food. Leonard declares the dish to be delicious, while Letty feels glad that her 4 years of effort have paid off.
The prince offers a genuine compliment, telling Letty she is incredibly smart for inventing such a thing.
Letty modestly downplays the praise and notes that she has created several different varieties of the food. She asks if he would like to try the other types, and Leonard enthusiastically agrees to sample more.
2 more dishes, identified as tomato risotto and mushroom soup, are shown steaming on the table.
Leonard is amazed to learn that such complex dishes can actually be freeze-dried in this manner.
He enjoys the next dish while Letty credits Sector for providing the many necessary ingredients.
The blonde prince acknowledges her explanation with a simple nod as he continues his meal. A sudden sharp clack sounding while a metal spoon rests against a hard surface. Prince Leonard, the blonde-haired man, expresses his desire to take her freeze-dried food creations along for his next dungeon hunting expedition. Letty confirms that she had already intended for the prince to use the food as part of his supplies.
The white-haired girl explains that she designed the items specifically to serve as convenient preserved rations for travelers.
A sudden rhythmic ba-dump sounding while Letty feels immense relief that Leonard didn't ask her to mass-produce the food for the city.
Letty observes the prince's smile, but remains wary, feeling that his true intentions are always difficult to predict.
The blonde man asks if only ice magic users can create these items, and the girl confirms that it is the case. Leonard accepts the explanation with a look of disappointment as he continues to drink his tea.
Letty sips her tea with a cheerful smile and mentions that there is something important she wants to ask him.
She grows internally anxious, hoping to shift the subject before he considers asking her to manufacture the food on a larger scale.
Letty gathers her courage and asks the prince how old he actually is, catching him slightly off guard.
The young girl is completely stunned to discover that Prince Leonard is the exact same age as her father. A sudden, purposeful step sounding while Letty calculates that the 28-year-old prince is only 4 years older than her previous life's age. Leonard leans back on the couch and asks Letty to reveal her own true age instead.
Letty stares at him with a look of pure confusion and shock, caught completely by surprise by the question.
The prince remains curious, his gaze fixed on the girl as he waits for her to respond to his inquiry.
A title card marks the 51st chapter of the story. Letty panics and frantically insists to the prince that she is merely 10 years old.
Leonard calmly advises her not to lie, revealing that the Spirit King has already told him a secret about her.
The white-haired girl is frozen in terror as the prince reveals he knows she originated from another world entirely.
A flashback shows the long-haired Spirit King giving a peace sign, while Letty internally screams about his betrayal of her secret. The blonde man charms her with a smile and asks if she will finally tell him the truth about herself. A sudden, quick turn sounding while Letty looks away and vaguely states she is just a little younger than he is. A sudden, radiant shimmer sounding as Leonard grins, and the scene shifts away from the blonde prince. A sudden, brilliant shimmer sounding while a man with dark red hair and a white uniform appears in a glowing aura. A sudden, quiet blink sounding as the dark-haired man watches the girl with a sharp and focused gaze. The man offers a soft, mysterious smile as the scene highlights his side profile and striking features.
Letty sits on the couch, looking up at the prince in the white and red uniform with an expression of pure bewilderment.
The prince wonders aloud if it would be considered rude for him to remain in a disguise while speaking with her.
Letty is caught completely off guard as the man bluntly declares that he is currently hitting on her.
A sudden, frantic fwop sounding as Letty recoils in shock at the prince's bold and unexpected romantic declaration. She protests that she is a child, but the dark-haired man counters by asking if she is mentally an adult.
a sudden bright sparkle sounding while he asks with a cheerful smile if she is opposed to his romantic interest.
Letty shouts her refusal, claiming that being a prince's consort is far too much baggage for her simple goals. The prince reassures her that it would be a marriage in name only, and she could continue living in her preferred region.
The girl feels a wave of anxiety as she realizes the man is not discouraged and is physically getting closer to her.
He leans in dangerously close to her face, trapping her with his intense presence and a confident smirk.
Letty's mind begins to spiral as she realizes the prince is both too close and incredibly attractive, causing her to blush.
A sudden, clumsy fwop sounding while Letty falls back, telling him he has his choice of any woman in the kingdom. A sudden, smooth slide sounding as the prince moves closer, insisting that he only wants her and no one else.
The dark-haired man calls out her name softly while maintaining his persistent focus on the flustered girl. Letty hides behind the arm of the couch, stammering about the reasons why he would possibly want to marry her. The prince offers a warm, knowing smile as he watches her struggle with her visible embarrassment.
A sudden, hearty ha-ha-ha sounding as the man laughs, while Letty complains that he is far too slippery to deal with.
Letty compares the prince to her father, Carlo, noting that her father is much easier for her to read and understand. She worries that marrying the prince would lead to a lifetime of being manipulated and pushed around by his whims. She imagines a peaceful life with her father, viewing it as a much easier and more comfortable path for her future. Her face turns a bright shade of red as she suddenly realizes the nature of her own wandering thoughts. Letty frantically grabs her hair, telling herself that she absolutely cannot afford to daydream about such complicated matters. She shouts to herself in a moment of panic, reminding herself that she and Carlo are simply father and daughter.
Prince Leonard, in his dark-haired disguise, sits comfortably on a chair and asks the flustered Letty if something is wrong.
The prince observes that the young girl seems to be lost and picked up. Letty panics and frantically shouts that she definitely was not daydreaming about anything.
The dark-haired man looks on with a confused expression as the girl continues to stumble over her words.
A sudden, loud shout sounding from the manor regarding the prospect of getting married. A title card marks the 52nd chapter of the story. Letty groans in frustration while clutching her hair in a moment of quiet introspection. Slumped over in exhaustion, the white-haired girl wonders when Prince Leonard will finally return to his own palace. Watching through a window, Letty sighs as she recalls the blonde prince constantly trying to get her attention. A sudden, repetitive knock sounding as Letty thinks about inventing something new to distract herself.
A sudden kerchok sounding while Ladius, the dark-haired man in green, enters the room to address Letty.
Letty is startled by the unexpected arrival and calls out the man's name in surprise. Ladius apologizes for the intrusion, but insists he has important news to share immediately. The man excitedly explains that a new item is waiting for her at the entrance of the manor.
Letty tells him to wait a moment while the dark-haired man looks on with a look of concern.
A sudden, quick glance sounding as Letty frantically checks to ensure the prince hasn't spotted them.
Ladius reassures her by explaining that Prince Leonard has gone to town with Lord Carlo.
Relieved that the prince is currently in disguise and busy, the young girl gives a happy thumbs up.
A sudden, powerful bam sounding as a wooden tricycle is revealed in the manor courtyard.
Letty is overjoyed to see that the vehicle looks exactly the way she had envisioned it. Ladius asks if this is the car she mentioned, but Letty clarifies that it is actually a tricycle. The girl explains that she wanted to start with a simple project before attempting to build a magic car. A sudden, emotional, teary sounding as Ladius expresses how moved he is by her progress over the years. In a flashback, Letty admits she had a carpenter build the device according to her specific blueprints. A sudden, quiet shh sounding as the girl asks Ladius to keep her new hobby a secret. Ladius, being obsessed with magical tools, eagerly asks Letty to explain the tricycle's mechanics in detail. Letty describes how the wooden base and spider material wheels were used to construct the vehicle. A sudden, bright squeeze and shine sounding while she demonstrates how magic flows into the handle to roll the wheels.
Letty shows off the basket on the back while Ladius marvels at the magic-powered vehicle.
The white-haired girl smiles with pride as she confirms the man's observations.
Ladius laughs and suggests they put the new invention to the test immediately. A sudden, careful, gently sounding while Letty takes hold of the tricycle's handlebar.
A sudden, brilliant shine sounding as Letty channels her magic into the device.
The girl notes that she can feel the energy actively running through the handle.
A sudden, mechanical clack sounding as Letty begins to activate the magical vehicle. A sudden, breezy schwa sounding while Letty zooms around the courtyard, laughing with pure delight. A sudden, radiant shine sounding as the girl realizes she can control the speed by adjusting her magic flow.
Letty stops and tells Ladius that the trial run turned out exceptionally well.
Ladius stares at the invention with sparkling eyes, clearly impressed by what she has created. A sudden, heavy creak and lean sounding while the man praises Letty's incredible ingenuity.
Letty thanks him but reiterates that her true goal is to eventually build a full-size car.
The girl asks Ladius to collaborate with her on even more ambitious magical tool projects in the future.
Their conversation is interrupted by a shout announcing that the others have returned home.
A sudden frantic dash sounding as Letty tells Ladius to quickly hide the tricycle from her father.
Ladius looks towards the warehouse as the girl's footsteps fade away into the distance.
A sudden rhythmic clack sounding as a pair of boots walks across the wooden floor. A sudden echoing clack sounding while Ladius approaches a large tarp-covered object in the warehouse.
Looking over her plans, Ladius ponders how to use the parts to make something even more incredible.
Lord Carlo, the silver-haired man, enters the building and asks Ladius what he is doing there. Letty turns around in surprise and calls out to her father. Carlo asks if he might interrupt her for a moment. Letty asks her father if the domain's recent improvements are thanks to everyone's collective hard work. The silver-haired man confirms that her assessment of the situation is correct. He praises her for her many inventions and for risking her life to aid the Spirit King. Carlo reveals that his primary focus during those events was always her safety rather than the king's. Letty admits with a smile that she also wasn't thinking much about the Spirit King's well-being. A sudden, energetic fwop sounding as her father shouts her name with a flushed face. A sudden, sharp gasp and stop sounding as he abruptly pulls back from her. He offers a quick apology, explaining that his strong emotions got the better of him.
Letty reflects on how he usually lifts her up into a warm hug during their interactions.
The man expresses that she is as precious to him as if she were his own flesh and blood. He suggests they should start maintaining. Confused by the sudden adult treatment, Letty wonders if someone has been whispering in his ear. A sudden, quiet whisper sounding while he admits that Sector and the prince gave him advice. Letty is overcome with a sense of gloom upon hearing that Prince Leonard influenced her father. A sudden, weary sigh sounding as she notes her own tendency to act without thinking. Her father tells her softly that she shouldn't worry too much about the situation.
He thanks her for the talk before turning to walk back toward the manor.
A close-up of Prince Leonard shows him staring with a serious and unwavering gaze. A title card marks the 53rd chapter of the story. About a month passes and Letty peeks cautiously from behind a wall to check her surroundings. A woman wearing glasses informs her that the prince left for the temple earlier that morning. Relieved by the news, Letty notes that the prince goes out quite often for someone in disguise. Her quiet moment is broken by a sudden, sharp call to address her. Ladius, the man with dark blue hair, rushes toward her while looking extremely pale. He frantically explains that the prince has finally discovered the hidden tricycle. Letty reacts with a look of pure, wide-eyed terror at the unexpected revelation. Ladius continues his explanation as the girl's shock turns into a realization of the problem. She is surprised to learn that Ladius had also been working on a secret project of his own. Ladius repeatedly bows as he apologizes for becoming too engrossed in his experimental work. Letty realizes that the man's distraction has inadvertently created a new complication. The blonde prince smiles with delight as he admires a newly modified carriage in the courtyard. Ladius reluctantly confirms that he is the person who constructed the device. He explains how he adapted an iron carriage to use magic propulsion based on her tricycle design. A sudden, heavy creak sounding as Letty marvels at the man's impressive mechanical skills. A sudden, rhythmic clack sounding while someone's boots walk across the stone courtyard. Prince Leonard ponders how to further increase the magical vehicle's top speed. The blonde man greets Letty and praises her for coming up with the original concept. He admits his shock at the discovery of wheels being powered purely by magic. He points out that standard carriages always require animal labor to function. The scene highlights how this new technology completely removes the need for horses. Leonard offers a charming smile and declares the new creation to be truly superb. A sudden heavy step sounding as he asks if she has any intention of selling the vehicles. A sudden tense grit sounding as Letty reacts with a look of extreme frustration. She gives a firm refusal, stating her desire to prevent the machines from being used for war. A sudden rhythmic tap sounding as the prince tells her she has nothing to worry about. Leonard looks back at her while preparing to explain the world's rules on conflict.
He reveals that all forms of war have been strictly banned by the powerful spirit kings.
A sudden, smooth reach sounding as he reassures her that the issue is settled.
A sudden, imposing loom sounding as the prince once again asks if she will sell the invention to him.
Ladius assures Letty he will keep her secret, noting that mass production would be problematic since others would soon desire the vehicles, leading Letty to question if he can truly keep such a significant secret.
Prince Leonard suggests that she could restrict sales exclusively to the royal family and ban all other ownership.
Letty offers to cover the cost of all materials, while an exhausted Ladius suggests hiring discreet, trustworthy craftsmen to help with the workload. Ladius asks the prince if he truly likes the invention that much, while the blonde man offers a calm smile. A sudden, radiant brightens sounding as the blonde prince's face lit up with excitement while shouting that he wants the vehicle at any cost. Letty and Ladius walk through the forest. A sudden, weary sigh sounding, while Letty groans and Ladius offers a quick apology for the situation. A sudden, rhythmic clack sounding as Letty addresses Prince Leonard and accepts the situation.
The white-haired girl looks directly ahead and promises to build a new vehicle just for him.
A sudden, joyous brightens sounding as Prince Leonard's face lights up while he excitedly thanks her for the generous offer. Letty announces that Ladius will take the lead on the project, causing the dark-haired man to cry out in shocked protest. Overcome with gloom, Letty offers a sheepish apology for dumping the workload on her friend. Surrounded by sparkling roses, Prince Leonard asks Letty if she will marry him. Letty reacts with wide-eyed shock while the blonde prince maintains his serene, smiling expression.
Letty stares at the man in disbelief, unable to process his sudden and bold declaration.
Letty is baffled that he would speak so openly when he could have lied to win her over, concluding that his smiling honesty is actually quite insane. Leonard asks why she is so upfront about her desires before continuing his thought. The prince suggests that she is the type of person who relaxes when others are honest with her, leaving Letty to stammer out a hesitant response. Letty admits to herself that she is a worrier who overanalyzes people's words, realizing she cannot afford to underestimate the prince's keen insight. Leonard sits casually on a desk and tells Letty that she is truly an attractive person. A sudden, smooth reach sounding as the prince takes her hand and follows it with a gentle kiss. Leonard vows to wait as long as necessary and asks if she will accept his proposal whenever she feels ready. A sudden, firm squeeze sounding while Letty smiles with a dark determination, internally swearing that she won't lose to him. Leonard smiles at her intense reaction and softly remarks on her spirit. Prince Leonard stands before blooming flowers. As Letty bids them farewell, the narration explains that Prince Leonard, disguised as Lord Shale, has decided to return to his castle, while Lord Carlo tells him to be careful on the road. A sudden, rhythmic step and jolt sounding while Lord Carlo thanks the prince for his hospitality as Leonard addresses High Priest Ladius. Prince Leonard offers a charming smile and says he will be waiting for the completion of his new project. The prince leans close to Letty and whispers that he is waiting for the specific answer he wants to hear. Lord Carlo watches the departure thoughtfully. A sudden, rhythmic clop-clop sounding as the carriage pulls away while the group watches from the courtyard. A sudden, weary sigh sounding while Ladius compares the prince's visit to a passing tornado. As Letty, she is exhausted. A sudden, gentle pat sounding as Lord Carlo stares at Ladius and tells him he messed up significantly. Letty gives an energetic thumbs up and claims the situation is fine because they won't have to explain it later, though Carlo tells her to show some actual remorse. A sudden, sharp clack sounding as Letty and Ladius bow in apology, while Carlo reminds them to be more careful in the future. Letty reflects on how the prince has been the only person she has talked to lately, even as Leonard tries to initiate another conversation. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as a close-up of Letty's eyes shows her shock when someone calls her name. Lord Carlo reaches out to Letty with concern and asks if she is feeling all right. Sector asks why Letty suddenly called the man father, prompting the girl to frantically change the subject to their trip to the capital while wondering why she said it. Letty is shocked when her father points out that her current posture isn't very noble.
Lord Carlo is deeply moved and teary-eyed when Letty calls him father, though she privately thinks he is being far too clingy.
Letty is relieved she played off the slip of tongue, but continues to wonder why she instinctively called him father. A horrific scene unfolds as an angry crowd screams for the execution of the rebels, Letty and Lord Carlo. The crowd continues to shout for their death while the young girl stares ahead with a pale face. Letty glances toward her father, who is blindfolded and bloodied, lamenting that their reunion is happening on the executioner's block. A sudden, mechanical ka-chak sounding while Carlo apologizes for being framed and getting her involved in his supposed crimes.
Close up on the girl's bruised face as she determines that she will not cry in this moment.
Letty vows to die with resolution to honor her family name, while a bloodied Carlo offers his final apologies to her.
A sudden, energetic thwop and rhythmic pant sounding as Letty bolts upright in bed, gasping for air. The young girl realizes with a shiver that she just experienced a horrific memory from the original Letty's previous time loop.
Letty sits upright in her bed, her mind drifting back to the horrific dream she just experienced, while wondering why such a nightmare would resurface now.
A close-up of Lord Carlo shows his bruised and bloodied face as he offers a weak and heartfelt apology to Letty. Letty reflects on her current life, noting that the domain is no longer in debt and that her mother has still not made an appearance. The young girl recalls the divine protection she enjoys from the powerful Spirit King, which has shaped her new path. Letty notes that she has managed to avoid any direct conflict with Mariette, making her realize that everything had been going perfectly until the recent dream. A title card marks the 56th chapter of the story. Letty arrives at a large white building and explains that she has stopped by the orphanage at the request of Ladius. Ladius looks concerned as he explains that a girl named Lynn has seemed upset lately and asks Letty to check on her. A sudden, sharp clack sounding as Letty enters the room to visit her old friend. Lynn is visibly startled to see her, but Letty offers a bright greeting to bridge the long time since their last meeting. Letty explains that she came because she heard Lynn was feeling down, but the brown-haired girl reacts with a look of silent hesitation. Lynn confesses with a pained expression that she has been suffering from recurring dreams where she is killed. Lynn immediately tries to retract her words, worrying that her admission sounds too strange, but a shocked Letty stops her. Letty places a hand on Lynn's shoulder and reveals that she has been having nearly identical dreams recently. Lynn is stunned to find that she isn't alone in her suffering, while Letty confirms the shared experience. Letty begins to suspect that these aren't just dreams, but memories of previous time loops, and she asks Lynn to describe what happens in them. Lynn takes a breath and prepares to recount the details of her persistent nightmare. Lynn explains that in her dreams, they live in extreme poverty at the orphanage until a group of dangerous strangers arrives. She describes a horrific scene where Ladius and a child named Lolo are killed alongside her. Lynn explains that she's been forced to relive this exact same execution over and over again in her sleep. Letty realizes with grim certainty that Lynn's visions are indeed residual memories from the original timeline. She ponders if more people are starting to regain loop memories because the established future has been so drastically altered. Letty considers what the specific differences between the people who remember their past lives and those who do not. Determined to find the truth, she decides that she will ask the Spirit King for his insight the following day. A close-up of the Spirit King shows him deep in thought as he processes the information Letty has provided. The elven being finds the situation quite intriguing as he stares ahead with a focused and serious gaze. In the forest, the Spirit King suggests searching for a common link between the three individuals who currently possess loop memories. Letty considers if their age is the common factor, but dismisses it since Prince Leonard is an adult. Letty notes that the prince often acts like a child regardless of his age, prompting Ladius to remark on her blunt honesty. The Spirit King's expression shifts as he realizes a potential connection and asks Letty for her attention. He reveals the core similarity. Letty, Lynn, and the prince are all individuals of royal blood. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as a close-up of Letty's eyes shows her profound shock at the revelation. Letty realizes that while the prince is direct royalty, both her mother and Lynn's mother were also of royal descent. The Spirit King acknowledges the possibility of his theory and notes that there may be other people who also remember the loops. A vision of Mariette appears as the narrative highlights that she too is of royal descent. Ladius notices Letty's sudden silence and calls out to her with a look of clear concern. Letty quickly claims that she is fine, though Ladius remains skeptical of her sudden distraction. A sudden, tense grit sounding as Letty resolves to stay firm, while the Spirit King advises her not to stress too much. The Spirit King stands and promises that he and the other high spirits will also investigate the matter. A sudden, respectful rustle sounding as Letty and Ladius bow to the Spirit King before taking their leave. The Spirit King calls out Letty's name just as she is walking away. Letty stops and turns back, wondering what the powerful being has left to say. The Spirit King acknowledges the great effort they have put in to reach this point in the current timeline. He tells her that the best course of action is to simply keep living her life as she has been doing. After a moment of silent eye contact, the Spirit King gives her his final permission to depart. A sudden rhythmic tap-tap sounding as the duo walks away while Letty steals one last glance back. A sudden, graceful turn sounding as the Spirit King shifts his gaze while Letty ponders the true intent of his parting words. Letty wonders if the powerful being was simply trying to cheer her up after she became overwhelmed by the new information. Letty's face lights up with a radiant smile as she offers a sincere word of thanks to the Spirit King. A title card marks the 57th chapter of the story. A sudden, sharp clack sounding as Latius sets his teacup down and ponders the recent findings. The black-haired priest reflects on the surprising fact that Lynn is also experiencing memories of the previous loops. Prince Leonard's brow furrows as he asks if other people in the region might be having similar visions. Latius explains to the gathered group that very few people possess the royal blood required to retain such memories. Lord Carlo thoughtfully notes that it is highly unlikely they will encounter anyone else with this unique burden. As Latius glances at the young girl, he observes that the current timeline has diverged significantly from Lynn's tragic dreams. He offers a warm smile and attributes this positive change entirely to the dedicated efforts of Lady Letty. Letty's eye widens in shock as she frantically tries to deflect the sudden and overwhelming praise. Lord Carlo agrees wholeheartedly with the sentiment, ignoring his daughter's embarrassed protest to stop being so clingy. The silver-haired girl becomes flustered and loud, struggling to handle the spotlight being thrust upon her. She tries to argue that their success is a group effort, but her voice trails off as the atmosphere shifts. A sudden, loud slam and jolt sounding as Murray strikes the table with both hands in frustration. The orange-haired merchant yells that Letty's persistent humility has become incredibly irritating to watch. Letty recoils in terror as Murray demands that she show more pride in her significant accomplishments. Murray dramatically demonstrates her point by posing as an arrogant noble and ordering everyone to bow at her feet. She insists that given Letty's impact on the domain, she has every right to act with such confidence. Letty watches with a bead of sweat on her cheek, internally questioning the woman's bizarre villainous attitude. Prince Leonard steps in to defend the girl, while Letty privately recalls that she was the original villainess in the past loop. A sudden, heavy stomp sounding as Murray and the prince face off in a heated argument. Murray mocks the prince's habit of hitting on women, leading to a loud exchange of petty insults between the two. As the pair continues to bicker loudly, Lord Carlo suggests to Letty and Latius that they keep the conversation private for now. Night begins to fall over the large white estate as the scene shifts away from the chaotic dinner table. A sudden, quiet creak sounding as Mariette peers through a door, wondering about the source of the commotion. A sudden, rhythmic clack sounding as the dark-haired girl enters the library to meet with a hooded man named Shardus. A heavy sigh escapes Mariette when Shardus claims their plans are proceeding well, despite her obvious skepticism. A sudden, soft thwomp sounding as the girl sits down and warns the blonde man not to rush her delicate work. She explains she is only there for a status report, while Shardus watches her with a calculating yellow eye. Mariette confirms her intent with a cold look, her mind clearly focused on her own dark agenda. She takes sadistic pleasure in remembering the previous timeline where Letty was executed under a false accusation. A sudden, tense grit sounding as her expression darkens while she considers the unexpected changes in the current world. She is deeply annoyed by the fact that the Sentencia family is no longer suffering from poverty. A dark manifestation pulses as she laments the destruction of the powerful creature they had unleashed. The girl remains lost in her bitter thoughts, unable to reconcile the new reality with her memories. A sudden, heavy slam sounding as Shardus suggests that someone else besides them might be loop-aware, causing Mariette to gasp. Mariette is left speechless as the hooded man reiterates the possibility of other people possessing their past memories. A sudden, sharp thwomp sounding as she stands up and dismisses his theory as a ridiculous impossibility. She sharply orders Shardus to stop making such baseless assumptions about their enemies. Shardus offers a mocking bow and takes his leave, though his smirk remains hidden beneath his hood. Mariette stares ahead with cold determination, vowing to drag Letty down into the depths of despair. A sudden, energetic whip sounding as she flips her hair and swears that she will succeed in her revenge. Shardus watches her depart, noting that their alliance remains mutually beneficial for the time being. Mariette's profile remains hard and unforgiving as she dwells on her hatred for the silver-haired girl. She gives a final, clipped confirmation of her resolve to destroy Letty's new life. Back at the table, Lord Carlo asks Letty if she would like to depart for the capital earlier than planned. He explains that he wants to personally update Prince Leonard on the Spirit King's crucial findings regarding the loops. Letty agrees that leaving early is wise, considering that members of the royal inner circle might also remember the past. A sudden, loud clatter sounding as Lord Carlo stands up abruptly and calls out Letty's name. Letty is visibly horrified as she realizes her father is demanding they begin immediate dance practice for the capital. A title card marks the 58th chapter of the story.
A sudden, rhythmic clack sounding as frilly skirts sway during a frantic practice session.
Murray and Lord Carlo prepare for the lesson in the grand training hall. The gray-haired man beams as he praises how lovely Letty looks in her new attire. Letty questions why she was forced into the dress, but her father simply looks pleased. The silver-haired girl feels visibly out of place in the elegant white gown. Carlo explains she needs to acclimate to formal wear, despite her deep sense of embarrassment. The man continues to smile warmly at his daughter, ignoring her obvious discomfort.
A sudden, rhythmic ba-dump sounding as Letty panics about the prospect of dancing with her father.
The young girl hesitantly asks if the dance practice is truly a requirement. Carlo confirms it is necessary to prepare for any unexpected social demands at the capital. He warns that she would be in trouble if she were asked to dance without knowing the steps.
A sudden, sharp clack sounding as Murray arrives and urgently calls out to the Lord.
The orange-haired woman yells that Carlo is coddling the girl to an excessive degree. Murray argues that it is far too late for such hasty preparations and blames his past negligence. Carlo points out that more critical life-or-death matters took precedence over simple social graces.
Silence falls between them as Carlo gestures for the woman to calm her anger.
Letty privately acknowledges the truth in Murray's harsh words about her lack of education. She reflects on how constant danger and strange proposals have left no time for ladylike training.
A sudden, heavy step sounding as Carlo decides it is time to begin the practice session.
Murray offers to provide the music for their training, surprising the gray-haired lord. The duo is shocked to discover Marie's hidden talent for playing the piano.
Murray smugly reminds them that her role as a tutor covers a wide range of subjects. A sudden, quick reach sounding as a gloved hand moves toward the hesitant silver-haired girl.
Carlo formally offers his hand and invites his daughter to join him for the first dance.
A sudden rhythmic ba-dump sounding as Letty slowly and nervously reaches out to him. A sudden firm tug sounding as her father pulls her into the proper dancing stance.
Letty lets out a small cry of surprise as she is suddenly brought close to him. Murrell's fingers begin to dance across the keys, filling the room with a graceful melody. The father and daughter move together in rhythm as the music flows through the hall. From behind, Murray remains focused on her performance while the lesson continues. A deep blush creeps onto Letty's face as she struggles with the physical proximity. Carlo looks down at his daughter with a comforting and affectionate expression. The girl is overwhelmed by her nerves and vocalizes her intense embarrassment. A sudden, soft chuckle sounding as Carlo tries to put her at ease during their dance. A title card marks the 59th chapter of the story. A sudden, firm tug sounding as Carlo adjusts his hold on Letty's waist.
A sudden, rhythmic clack-clack sounding as their shoes move in unison.
Carlo notes that dancing is simpler when partners stay close together. Letty's eye widens as she realizes the truth of her father's words.
A sudden, soft squish sounding as Letty realizes just how close they are.
The silver-haired girl begins to sweat from the sheer intensity of the moment.
Carlo's expression shifts as a memory of Prince Leonard comes to his mind.
He asks Letty about the nature of her recent conversations with the prince. A sudden, sharp gasp sounding as Letty reacts with shock to her father's direct inquiry. Carlo seems nervous as he waits for her to explain their friendly behavior. The man maintains a serious profile while awaiting his daughter's response. Letty recalls the prince's constant attempts to flirt and his sudden proposal. She determines that she is far too young to even consider the idea of marriage.
A sudden, firm squeeze sounding as Carlo grips her hand while waiting for an answer.
He asks with a grave tone if she is absolutely certain about her feelings.
Carlo is stunned by her vague response and asks if that is all she has to say.
Lord Carlo gazes thoughtfully as the dance practice continues.
A sudden, sharp twist sounding as Letty's shoe catches on the floor.
Carlo catches the silver-haired girl and asks if she is all right, while she admits it hurts. The man looks down at his daughter with a worried expression.
A sudden, hot flush sounding as Letty panics about their physical proximity.
Carlo calls out her name in surprise at her reaction. Letty lets out an eep as her father asks if she was hurt, to which she stammers a denial. The girl becomes flustered and tells Murray to stop making unnecessary comments. A sudden, sharp ka-chak sounding as Mireille adjusts her glasses and warns of the embarrassment of falling.
The father and daughter look toward the orange-haired woman. Carlo kneels down to attend to his daughter's foot. Mireille stands over them with an authoritative and serious gaze. Letty privately acknowledges that the woman's assessment is pert. Mireille offers a firm nod as Carlo apologizes for his lack of thoughtfulness. Letty smiles and claims she twisted her ankle to avoid more dancing, shocking her father.
A sudden, energetic fwop sounding as Carlo reacts with alarm to her news.
Mireille watches as Carlo insists on carrying Letty back to her room. A sudden, rhythmic step sounding as Carlo carries the protesting girl away. The man remains focused and determined to look after his daughter. A sudden, quick lean sounding as Carlo warns her that walking might aggravate the injury.
He tells the silver-haired girl to simply hang on to him for support.
A sudden, intense flush sounding as Letty reacts with extreme embarrassment. A sudden, rhythmic step sounding as Carlo walks away while Letty screams for him to stop.
A title card marks the 60th chapter of the story. The narrative notes that the group finally arrives at the capital after a long carriage journey. Letty is amazed by the sights and excitedly notes they have reached the capital city.
Carlo tells Letty to explore the city while they attend an audience with the eldest prince. A blonde man in common attire welcomes them to the capital. Letty and Mireille are stunned to realize the man is actually Prince Leonard in disguise. Leonard confirms his identity with a cheerful and friendly smile. A sudden, suspicious stare sounding as Letty wonders why the prince is in disguise and has so much free time. A sudden, pained irk sounding as Carlo pulls Letty away while she tries to address the prince. Leonard asks about her appointment with his father while the girl appears hesitant. The prince explains a complex plan involving another man masquerading as him for a formal meeting. Letty is internally bewildered by the unnecessary complexity of the royal scheme. Leonard looks at her tenderly and admits that he simply wanted to see her. Letty narrows her eyes and asks if he is plotting something again. Leonard laughs joyfully, clearly happy that the silver-haired girl understands his nature so well.
Mireille reacts with shock when Leonard offers to personally show them around the city. The prince becomes serious and prepares to ask a specific question.
Letty is taken aback when he tells her there is something he needs to ask.
The scene shifts to the group sitting in a gazebo enjoying tea and pastries.
A sudden, quiet clack sounding as a teacup is placed onto its saucer. A sudden, soft mutter sounding as Letty expresses her desire to visit a magic tool store instead. The girl decides to skip the pleasantries and get straight to the point.
Leonard mentions a particular dish called Malin.
Letty is stunned and repeats the name of the food in disbelief.
Leonard recalls his time visiting Sentencia while Letty wonders what he is thinking.
The prince stares at a bowl of ramen with a look of intense curiosity.
Letty explains that the dish is meant to be slurped up and is very delicious. Prince Leonard prepares to taste the ramen and admits he has no idea what to expect from the dish.
Letty realizes she can accurately predict the prince's thoughts just by observing his shocked expression. The silver-haired girl recalls that the prince ended up absolutely loving the meal she introduced. Leonard asks if she provided the recipe during her previous visit, and Letty confirms she followed it exactly. The blonde man notes that despite the recipe, the flavor is still quite different from hers.
Letty wonders why they cannot replicate the taste when the recipe remains the same. Leonard apologizes but asks for the recipe again, hoping she can find why they cannot recreate it properly. Letty worries her limited time in the capital will be entirely consumed by solving this culinary mystery. A heavy silence falls over the blonde man as he becomes visibly gloomy and looks away.
The young girl reacts with confusion to the sudden and dramatic shift in the prince's mood.
Leonard perks up and suggests they begin their tour of the capital city immediately.
Letty is startled by the prince's formal and polite way of addressing her.
The blonde man offers his hand while the girl remains visibly nervous about the interaction.
A sudden, quick reach sounding as Letty reflects on how the prince's behavior constantly perplexes her.
A single word on a glittering background commands the narrative to remember a specific moment.
A close-up reveals a sudden, sharp realization reflected in the silver-haired girl's eye. A sudden, energetic fwop sounding as Letty reacts with extreme shock to an unexpected sound. Leonard asks what is wrong while Letty struggles to find the words to explain herself. Mireille wonders if she was the only one who heard a strange, distant noise.
Letty apologizes and dismisses her earlier suspicion of hearing a faint female voice. The group begins their walk through the grand and busy streets of the capital city. A high view shows the bustling activity near the city's elegant white buildings and plazas. Workers and locals go about their daily routines in the pristine urban environment. Letty is absolutely dazzled by the impressive scale and architectural beauty of the capital. She excitedly notes how much prettier and crowded the city is compared to her domain. The silver-haired girl stops in front of a blue shop sign and expresses her amazement.
Leonard mentions the stark differences between a large city and the countryside, while Letty asks for clarification.
He dismisses her question about his quiet comment while appearing slightly flustered and sweating.
The hooded prince lets out a soft, amused chuckle as they continue their journey. Letty hesitantly asks where their final destination for the city tour will be. Leonard winks and tells the girl she will find out once they arrive at the spot. Letty agrees to follow him, while Murray admits that his secrecy is a bit scary. The group arrives at a massive, domed building featuring grand marble columns and white walls.
Letty stares up at the enormous structure with a look of quiet disbelief.
Leonard confirms that they have finally reached the destination he had in mind.
The young girl wonders which wealthy nobleman owned such an incredibly large and fancy manor. A sudden, smooth slide sounding as Leonard reveals they have arrived exactly where she wanted to go. The interior is revealed to be a massive, glittering magic tool shop filled with rare items.
Letty and Murray are completely stunned by the unexpected and thoughtful surprise.
The silver-haired girl lets out a loud and high-pitched scream of pure, unadulterated shock. T is overwhelmed by the massive scale of the shop and the variety of tools on display.
A sudden, quick whip sounding as Leonard explains the shop's strict entry requirements for nobles.
Murray points out that every product in the shop is expensive, which Leonard confirms with a smile. The prince adds that the store even stocks rare artifacts retrieved from dangerous dungeons. Letty points at a large, star-shaped magic stone glowing brightly inside a glass display case. Both Letty and Marie admit they have never seen such a large and sparkly stone before. A sudden, sharp creak sounding as Leonard prepares to show them something even more surprising. A massive, curved horn is displayed prominently as a rare artifact within the shop. Various display cases hold exotic items, including a large purple scale and other mysterious stones.
Letty and Murray are left looking utterly exhausted and overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the shop.
Letty points to a large, dark horn inside a display case and asks if it belonged to a monster, which Leonard confirms. The blonde man adds that the rare artifact was recovered from a deep dungeon. Letty is amazed and asks how the beast was defeated, but the prince chuckles and admits that it actually was not. The silver-haired girl is left looking completely bewildered and curious about the mystery. The narrative reveals that the materials were harvested from a dragon that was discovered dead. Leonard looks at the displays and notes that while the items are impressive, they are also incredibly old. The prince mentions that the shop also stocks materials for magic tools, immediately piquing the girl's interest. A close-up of a price tag reveals an astronomical cost of $1 million for the rare materials. Letty looks grumpy and defeated as she realizes how expensive the items truly are. The girl turns away from the shelves and admits that she simply cannot afford to buy them.
Leonard correctly guesses that she is worried about the price, catching the young girl off guard.
Letty explains her desire to find affordable materials so she can mass-produce magic tools for the commoners in Sentencia. A moment of quiet resolve as she considers the future of her domain and its people. Leonard apologizes with a smile, admitting he did not expect her to be thinking of industrial production so soon. The blonde man looks at her thoughtfully and asks why she is so determined to create them.
Letty clenches her fists with passion and declares that mass-produced tools would allow everyone to live a much easier life.
She adds that having an abundance of materials could open the door to many other helpful purposes as well. A sudden, soft waver sounding as Letty beams with hope while an unseen voice calls out to her. Mireille scolds Letty for her unladylike behavior while Leonard playfully interprets the older woman's frustration. Letty looks back at the annoyed Mireille and bluntly points out that she was never raised to be a proper lady. Leonard finds her honesty incredibly amusing and lets out a joyful laugh. The prince says he finally understands her perspective, much to the young girl's relief. Leonard suggests that they move on to look at the finished magic tools themselves. A sudden, firm squeeze sounding as the blonde man takes Letty's hand in his. He leads the way, telling the silver-haired girl to come along with him. Letty is startled by the sudden physical contact and lets out a cry of protest. The girl is left blushing and flustered as she questions why they need to hold hands at all. Leonard remains focused and mentions that there is someone specific he wants her to meet. Letty looks ahead with a curious expression as the prince offers to introduce her. The group enters a grand, sunlit room featuring elaborate chandeliers and shelves filled with laboratory equipment.
Letty is impressed by the workshop, while Leonard spots the man he was looking for.
The prince steps forward and formally announces that he has brought the young girl with him.
A man with silver hair and glasses looks up from a vial and addresses her as Letitia.
The scholarly man gazes at her with a calm and observant look.
Letty is struck by a sudden realization, feeling certain that she has seen this man before.
The silver-haired girl reflects on his appearance and struggles to place where she knows him from.
Leonard introduces the man as Clyme Merlans, the renowned master of magic tools. The prince explains his hope that Clyme can help Letty with the production of cars in her domain.
Letty repeats the man's name in a whisper, appearing visibly shocked by the revelation. She recalls the name and face from an otome game, realizing she has met a major hero of the story.
Clyme is noted to be a prestigious teacher at a magic school, as well as an expert engineer. Clyme asks why she is staring, prompting Letty to quickly stammer that nothing is wrong. Internally, the girl is reeling from the fact that she has ended up meeting one of the game's main love interests.
Leonard smiles at her reaction, noting how many unexpected events happen when they are together.
A sudden, sharp click sounding as Clyme adjusts his glasses and prepares to show her around.
Letty is left wide-eyed and stunned by the sudden turn of the conversation.
A sudden, soft pat sounding as Leonard silences her concerns about Lord Shale's schedule. The prince apologizes and explains that he must unfortunately depart for other business immediately.
He tells Letty she can stay as long as she likes, leaving the girl annoyed by his flighty behavior.
A sudden, gentle pat sounding as Leonard leaves Letty in the care of the magic master.
Marie looks at Letty with a silent and concerned expression.
Letty reflects on how incredibly awkward her current group dynamic with Clyme and Marie feels.
The silver-haired man explains that he was personally involved in the development of the shop's magic tools.
Letty thinks to herself that she is currently far more interested in the hero than the tools themselves. She realizes it has been so long since she arrived in this world that she has forgotten Clyme's character details.
Clyme stares back at the young girl with a quiet and observant silence.
A sudden, sharp snap sounding as Clyme adjusts his glasses, while Letty stammeringly confirms her attention. A sudden, heavy sigh sounding as Letty begins to feel the weight of Murray's disapproval. The young girl notes that she is trying to ignore the intense, act properly glare Murray is sending her. A sudden, quick whistle sounding as Clyme and Letty trade subtle and observant glances. Clyme leans in and asks Letty in a quiet whisper if he may ask her a specific question.
The Master of Magic Tools directly asks why she does not want to announce her car development to the world.
Clyme mentions how Prince Leonard showed him her wonderful plans for the self-moving magic car.
Letty remains silent as Clyme notes that most people would scramble to announce such a discovery.
He warns that there is a serious possibility her invention could be used for the wrong purposes.
Murray thoughtfully acknowledges Clyme's point about the risks of announcing the new technology. Clyme asks if it would be a problem to involve the Spirit King and create rules for the manufacturing process.
Letty looks up at the older man with a look of wide-eyed surprise and uncertainty.
The scholarly man states that if he is to be involved, he needs her to have more professional awareness.
A sudden, sharp ka-check sounding as Clyme tells her she needs more awareness as a proper inventor. A sudden, firm clench sounding as Letty's hand grips her dress in growing and visible frustration.
Letty is deeply offended and wonders why a total stranger would speak to her so condescendingly.
A close-up of Letty's eyes shows her sharp and sudden realization of her own irritation.
She firmly declares that she has made her decisions after a great deal of thought.
Letty angrily asks Clyme who he thinks he is to judge her so quickly and harshly.
A sudden, tight clench sounding as Letty struggles to contain her anger toward the arrogant master.
Clyme appears startled as Letty's sharp and sudden reaction catches him off guard.
A sudden, rapid dash sounding as Letty flees the room while Murray calls after her.
A sudden, sharp stop sounding as Murray halts Clyme from following the upset girl.
A sudden, bright glint sounding as Murray dismisses Clyme to check on her lady herself.
Clyme is left standing alone in the workshop, looking visibly dejected and confused by the interaction.
Later, Letty is shown alone in her room, kneeling beside her grand and elegant bed.
She continues to fume over how Clyme could speak to her in such an insulting manner. Letty clenches her fist, feeling that Clyme was making fun of her and dismissing her hard work. A sudden, light knock-knock sounding at the door interrupts her angry thoughts.
Her father enters the room and asks her if something happened to upset her so much.
Letty looks at him with a pained expression and softly calls out to her papa. A sudden, gentle pat sounding as her father kneels to comfort the shaking and upset girl.
Letty explains her encounter with Clyme and how he pushed his unwanted opinions on her.
The silver-haired girl sadly admits that perhaps her choices as an inventor were actually wrong. A sudden, soft rub-rub sounding as her father gently strokes Letty's hair to calm her down.
He looks at her with a kind smile and tells her that she simply needs to relax a little more. Letty reacts with confusion to her father's unexpected and simple advice about her stress.
He tells her there is no way that person could truly understand her intentions yet.
Her father adds that she is currently dealing with too many issues at once.
A sudden, light tap sounding as he playfully touches her nose to brighten her mood.
Letty leans into her father's embrace, feeling comforted by his quiet presence and support. A sudden, heavy step sounding as Climb approaches Letty while carrying a massive bouquet of red roses.
Letty is left looking completely stunned and speechless by the grand and flowery gesture.
Climb formally apologizes to the young girl for speaking so rudely to her earlier. Letty is surprised that Climb brought the flowers specifically for her.
Climb admits he wanted to give them but worried it might be a bother. Letty loudly denies that it is a bother at all.
She apologizes for getting angry and running away so suddenly. Climb insists that the fault was entirely his own.
A sudden low mutter sounding as Climb laments his inability to keep a conversation going.
Climb remains silent as he adjusts his passes.
Letty wonders what she should do after receiving such a large bouquet.
The silver-haired man begins to speak to her once again.
Letty thanks him for coming all this way with such lovely flowers.
Climb starts to respond, but stops himself in hesitation. The scholarly man declares that he thinks she is a great inventor.
He adds that she possesses plenty of wonderful ideas.
Climb says he cannot wait to see her ideas come to fruition. The man explains that he simply wanted to tell her that.
He admits that he went too far and ended up hurting her feelings.
Narration reveals Climb's history of causing misunderstandings in the game. It is noted that his behavior was simply due to his own awkwardness. Climb looks at the girl with a quiet and observant expression.
Letty declares with a bright smile that she wants to learn from him.
She mentions how much she still has to learn about magic. Climb looks at her with a stunned and thoughtful gaze. The master of magic tools happily agrees to her request. Letty smiles brightly with pure joy and gratitude. Leonard and the others are shown peeking through a door to watch over the pair. Letty narrates that she became friends with Climb and visited his laboratory.
The girl is thrilled by magic tools she has never seen before.
Climb is glad to see her interest in all the workshop equipment.
Letty thanks him for the invitation to his research lab. Climb asks if there is anything he can help her with to make amends.
Letty takes a moment to consider her request.
She thinks about asking for information regarding the mysterious Shardus. Letty asks Climb if he knows a sorcerer with that name. Climb confirms that he believes he knows of him. The man adds that he is unsure if it is the same person she seeks. Climb recalls a student by that name from his time at the magic school.
He describes the individual as a problem student who abused his immense power.
The scene shifts to the magic school at night as Letty listens intently.
Climb's story helps Letty finally recall the face of the hooded sorcerer.
Letty is certain that this is the same person she is looking into.
She is stunned to find that Climb has a personal connection to Shardus.
Climb apologizes for making her feel anxious with his tale. Climb reacts with shock as Letty reveals that Shardus once attacked her. She adds that she was just thinking about how to handle the future. Climb looks at her with a quiet and contemplative gaze. A sudden soft mutter sounding as Climb turns away to search the room.
The silver-haired man tells her to take the item he is offering. A sudden, sharp clink sounding as a golden ring drops into Letty's hands.
Climb explains that it is a tool used to change one's appearance. Letty asks if the ring functions similarly to the one Prince Leonard wears. Letty is unsure about borrowing such an amazing magic tool from the master. Climb advises her to wear the ring whenever she decides to go outside. Letty realizes the scholarly man is worried about her while he silently adjusts his glasses. The silver-haired girl beams with a bright and blushing smile of gratitude.
A sudden, sharp ka-chok sounding as the blushing man adjusts his glasses in silence.
Climb offers a backup ring while Letty finds his awkward personality rather charming. Letty explains the function of the appearance-altering magic ring to a skeptical Murray. The brown-haired woman notes that the countermeasure against Shardus seems somewhat overdue. Morel dismisses the need for a ring while Letty insists she must take one. The older woman expresses excitement at the prospect of seeing the girl look different. Mireille reacts with a wide-eyed and shell-shocked expression to Letty's plans. Mireille teases the girl as Letty begrudgingly agrees to wear the magic ring.
Letty's eyes light up with a sudden and clever idea.
A sudden light fwop sounding as Letty reveals she has a specific destination in mind. The silver-haired girl ponders the best flavors for her new freeze-dried food invention. Marie realizes with shock that Letty intends to infiltrate the male-only Knights cafeteria. Letty confidently declares that they will use the magic tools to sneak into the mess hall. A sudden, soft peak sounding as Lord Shale looks into the room to check on them.
A sudden, light clack sounding as the blonde-haired man mentions his prior discussion with Letty.
Lord Shale and Letty exchange confident thumbs-up gestures as the brown-haired woman watches. The chapter title indicates Letty's ongoing struggle to escape her destined death. A sudden, bright flash sounding as the magic ring activates on a slender finger.
Light swirls around the girl's legs during her magical transformation.
The girl's silver hair shimmers as the magic begins to alter her features. Letty is delighted to see that she has successfully transformed into a young boy.
Murray has been transformed into a tall, blonde-haired man in a green vest.
The young boy stares in wide-eyed shock at his companion's new appearance.
Letty is stunned to learn that the handsome blonde man is actually Murray in disguise. The disguised woman finds it quite unusual to be without her glasses. A heavy silence fills the room as the two transformed companions stare at one another.
Murray blushes as Letty finally accepts the reality of their magical disguises.
A sudden light peers sounding as Lord Shale asks if the pair is ready to depart. The group prepares to head out for their undercover investigation at the cafeteria. Letty is amazed by the grand scale and busy atmosphere of the dining hall. The young boy is impressed by the high quality of the facility and the staff.
Lord Shale leads the group to find a seat after ordering their meals.
Letty watches intently as the knights around them enjoy their dinner.
The silver-haired boy finds the knight's meat dish to be incredibly appetizing.
A maid arrives at their table to serve their freshly prepared meals.
A sudden, sharp clack sounding as Letty realizes her meal is identical to the knights.
Lord Shale warmly confirms that he recommended the specific dish for them. Letty gratefully thanks the blonde-haired man before taking her first bite. The boy's face immediately brightens with pure joy upon tasting the food. Letty is blown away by the tender meat and the perfectly matched sauce. The young inventor compares the cafeteria food to Lord Shale's excellent home cooking. Letty notes that the seasoning is quite different from what she is used to. The silver-haired boy becomes deeply curious about the specific cooking techniques used. Letty is consumed by her scientific curiosity regarding the preparation of the meal. The young boy asks Lord Shale why he is not eating his own meal. Lord Shale reveals that he reminisced about this specific dish every time he died. A sudden sharp jolt sounding as the boy reacts with shock to the surprising news. Lord Shale smiles warmly while mentioning that the prince has repeatedly died of starvation. The blonde man is glad the girl is satisfied, while Murray advises the boy to be less impulsive. Lord Shale suddenly realizes there is something important he needs to ask the chef. The blonde man asks his companions to wait a moment as his tall companion nods in agreement. The tall man says he will call for the carriage as the silver-haired boy thanks him. Letty watches from the doorway as her disguised companion departs to fetch their ride. A sudden low throb sounding as the boy reflects on how rare it is to be left alone. The silver-haired boy decides to take off the magic ring just for a moment.
A sudden sharp leer sounding as a dark figure watches the child from the shadows of the trees.
A sudden bright flash sounding as the magic activates and Letty returns to her original form. A sudden soft shine sounding as the golden ring on her finger begins to glow.
A sudden low rumble sounding as Letty expresses relief at being back to her normal self.
The silver-haired girl is suddenly struck by a sense of confusion and alarm.